I'd like to call this meeting of the San Mateo County Harbor District regular meeting for June 21st to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Commissioner Bernardo?
Here.
Commissioner Brennan?
Here.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Present.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Here.
President Mateusz?
Here. Next we have some proclamations.
President Mateusz, I'd like to defer the proclamations until the July meeting.
All right. At this point, I don't have any speaker slips. Is anyone errant on delivering speaker slips? Well, thank you. So, commissioner comments. Commissioners may make public statements limited to 5 minutes. Do we have any commissioners who would like to make some comments?
I have comments, but if someone wants to go first, I'm fine with that.
Commissioner Brennan.
Thank you. So I delivered a packet to all the board members, and there's also an extra copy for the public sitting on the table over here. And there's a cover letter, which is actually an email that I sent to our management today. And then there's also attached emails as well. And the subject of the cover email is Stephen Miller removed Maverick's Invitational from permit number 2015-34. In February 2017, the Harbor District began working with bankruptcy attorney Emily Charlie to address problems related to permit number 2016-01, crafted by Stephen Miller, Harbor District General Counsel. Since Emily Charlie began working for the Harbor...
Has any of this been discussed in closed session?
No, it has not. So please don't interrupt because you're taking up my 5 minutes. Since Emily Charlie began working for the Harbor District, Stephen Miller placed himself in the role of overseeing her work and filtering her communications to the board. This is a concern because Charlie's bankruptcy expertise is necessary only because Miller improperly prepared special use permit 2015-34. The special use permit 2016-01. The Harbor District is paying an attorney who mangled the permit, Miller, to oversee a bankruptcy attorney, Charlie, while she is attempting to fix a mess caused by Miller's improperly prepared permit. Apparently, Miller's bankruptcy team is expanding. I'm not going to read all of that section because we don't have time. I'm going to skip to the next paragraph. Miller's 5-year exclusive permit created an asset that's tied up in knots in bankruptcy court. A court-ordered bankruptcy stay is negatively impacting the future of the 2017-18 Maverick surfing competition. Miller's 5-year exclusive permit prevents other organizations from holding an event and does not require that the permittee cartel hold an event. For this reason and others, Miller's exclusive permit is preventing athletes from competing in the Mavericks competition. As I stated in my June 14 emails, I'm concerned that Miller placed the Harbor District in legal jeopardy. I'm also concerned that the district's legal fees related to the special use permit, number 2016-01, are through the roof because of the following. Stephen Miller, General Counsel for the Harbor District, removed Maverick's Invitational from 2015-2016 special use permit 2015-34 and 5-year special use permit 2601 that terminates on March 31st, 2021. Two things happened that harmed the Harbor Districts and Maverick's Invitational. Stephen Miller negotiated contracts in the background without oversight or review by the board and executed the agreements without oversight or review by the board. Number two, Stephen Miller altered, changed, or otherwise affected the entity to whom the permit was issued without review by the board and without permission of the entity that was removed from the permit. Miller's decision to remove Maverick's Invitational favored cartel's interests instead of the interests of the Harbor District. Miller's permits never saw the light of day before they were executed on June 30th, 2015 and June 6th, 2015. Miller did not bring substantially altered permits back to the board for consideration and for public comment at a public meeting. Miller denied the Harbor Commission and the public an opportunity to consider the changes he made to special use permit number 2015-34 and permit 2016-01. On November 6, 2015, Glenn Lazoff, interim general manager at the time, emailed the executed 5-year permit to Cassandra Clark, Brian Waters, and Zoe Lee. Miller and his firm, Hanson Bridget, has not provided the board with any documents or emails that indicate that Mavericks Invitational was notified about or agreed to the substantial changes Miller made in advance of the November 6, 2015 email from Lazoff. And I just want to restate that all the attached documents are in the package that I passed out, and there was, maybe somebody picked up the one over on that table. And if anyone wants a copy of this information, I'm happy to provide it via email. You can contact me, or you can phone me at 415-816-6111. Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments?
Just a quick formality. This is with regard to this memo from our general counsel, Steve Miller, notice of litigation hold for.
Excuse me, Commissioner. I believe you're referring to.
No, I know, but I'm just showing that I'm going to turn this into you because you asked for a signature. And I know that I'm only allowed to read the title. I know it's attorney-client privilege, but I know that the title is public because it's been put on closed session agendas, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm returning that to you for the request so that we're making sure that things are preserved. Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments?
Just that I'd like to pull some things off consent, just warning you.
Okay. I've got a comment or two. First, I wanted to thank the board for how we're working together, and just remind members of the board, I did get communication from another agency that had a great concern about our commissioners as to proper protocol for interagency communications. So, in essence, it was saying, please let's follow appropriate methods to work through our general manager or elected peers. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this other than to say I hope we all maintain sufficient decorum when we work with other departments.
What agency?
I'm not going to go into that right now. So additionally, I wanted to talk about our harbor committees. You know, we've worked hard to develop committees to further the goals of the Harbor District. One of the things that we've talked about in 16 on several meetings is the scope and role of committees. We had a deadline set to provide scope and duties to be provided by January 31st of 17. That date came and went. We had a date that was requested of the commission, February 28th of 17. That date came and went. So I believe that what I'd like to see happen right now is we're going to put all the committees on hold. No committees will meet in any official capacity whatsoever until the scope and duties have been submitted and approved, not only by staff, but by this board. So there won't be any committees in existence at this point until we come up with our scope and duties.
Does that include the Oyster Point Liaison Committee since we're working with
No.
South San Francisco?
That's part of the MOU JPA.
Okay, just to clarify, because that's the only committee I'm on, so I just want to make sure that I'm in the right place at the right time.
All right.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
So you're saying the committees cannot meet?
Not in any official capacity.
What
But
are,
then how do we, just like organizational point, how do we do what you're asking us to do if we can't meet?
That's an excellent question, but I would suggest that people have to get together, and the first priority is coming up with scope and duties, and it has to be brought to the board. So it'll be an agendized item and saying this committee would like to have its scope and duties approved.
I believe we'd have to meet to do that.
Yeah.
All right.
So can we just meet to do that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, on to our consent calendar. I believe that we have some items to be pulled.
Yes, that would be bills and claims, item, so that's 1, 3, and which was the item where, Bud's left?
That's number 3.
That's also number 3?
Yeah, gonna pull that if you have one,
Okay, so,
in order to introduce.
okay, so staff is pulling 3, I'm pulling 1, and also 7.
All right, do we have a motion? Is there anybody else want some items pulled? We have a motion to approve 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 9.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
President Mateusz,
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz,
Aye.
Commissioner Chancarelli,
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan,
Aye.
Commissioner Bernardo.
Aye.
All right, so those items will be moved to the tail end of the meeting, which brings us to item 10, the Resource Conservation District presentation, Pillar Point Harbor Water Quality Update. Mr. Moran, receive a report here.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is an information-only item. No action is required. There are no new fiscal implications. The board approved entering into an agreement with the Resource Conservation District on May 18, 2016 for an amount not to exceed $146,370 through fiscal year 18-19. Since 2002, Pillar Point Harbor has been included on a statewide list of contaminated water bodies due to its high fecal indicator bacteria concentrations. This contamination continues to cause beach postings that warn the public that the water is contaminated and not suitable for human contact. In 2008, the Resource Conservation District initiated the Pillar Point Harbor Source Identification Project to help characterize sources of bacterial contamination in the harbor. To follow up on this study, agreements were adopted between the district and RCD to further address this issue and other water quality concerns by monitoring various water quality parameters within Pillar Point Harbor, as well as stormwater outfalls flowing into the harbor. RCD Representative Brittany Bolke is here tonight to give us an in-depth presentation and answer any questions that the board may have.
And I'd like to start briefly. TJ Glothier, the president of the board of the RCD, and just want to emphasize our appreciation for the working relationship that we have had with the Harbor Commission for some time and the staff, and to reiterate the seriousness that we all take this problem of the contamination of the harbor, and our hope, and my personal hope in particular, that we really can launch a very aggressive program now, based on the work that Brittany and the others have done, to trace back the sources of these problems, try to once and for all really identify where these problems are coming from, so that we can all work together to solve them. It's been a good working relationship. We look forward to continuing that. I think Brittany's got a good presentation here that will stimulate some good thinking and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. I'm Brittany. I'm a water resources specialist at the RCD. Kellex is here with me. She's going to do a little bit of the presentation as well. She's the executive director. My assistant Julian is here. He's been amazing. I wanted to introduce him. He's right there. He's been helping a lot. And I also want to thank Keith Mangold for all of his help throughout this process. So we are the RCD. We were formed in 1939 in partnership with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We're a non-regulatory special district of the government, and we provide technical assistance in a variety of program areas that you can see listed there. So as John mentioned, the issue that we're talking about tonight is bacterial pollution in Pillar Point Harbor, which has been an issue for a very long time, as you all know. It has resulted in beach closures, like the picture that you guys can see there. basically saying that the water isn't suitable to contact or swim in or touch or anything like that. So where does this come from? It could come within the ocean water itself, but I really like this saying, it's the health of our waters is the principal measure of how we live on the land. So this picture is showing a watershed, which is basically a drainage basin where all of the surface water comes together and eventually drains to the ocean. So you can see there's creeks and rivers and rainfall, and it all kind of comes together and can pick up pollutants along the way on the landscape. So who is responsible for the issue in Pillar Point Harbor? The answer is everybody. You can see in this picture that there are things happening in the harbor, there are animals, there are various activities that could cause bacterial pollution, but there are also a lot of things happening on land. And it just, is a matter of how it makes its way down to the ocean, whether it be through a creek, whether it be through a direct discharge to the stormwater system, such as washing your car, or whether it's something like pet waste that got left on the sidewalk and then gets washed off into the system from rain. So there's a lot of different mechanisms how this can happen. So just to kind of reiterate what John said, our partnership started with you guys in 2014 with the Source ID project. And that was largely focused on bacterial pollution within Pillar Point Harbor. And trying to basically see, is it coming from within the harbor or is it coming into the harbor from the watersheds and the land? And what was largely determined was that it's coming into the harbor from the freshwater inflows. And so after that, we actually focused away from bacteria on different pollutants and established baseline conditions throughout the whole harbor for a wide variety of pollutants. And so those were kind of asking, where are we seeing problems and what exactly are the pollutants of concern or the types of bacteria of concern. And now we have come back and have started a very focused investigation of bacteria, and we're focusing on Capistrano Beach as a sort of case study. And so now we're looking at how is this happening and why is this happening. So we did this by a variety of mechanisms this past year, and that has included taking water quality samples, not only in the harbor, but also upstream in the watersheds, which is really the first time that this has been done, looking specifically at bacteria. And so, that's kind of necessary to start visualizing trends about where it's introduced into the system. And we also did a lot of what we call field recon or surveys, where we went out and tried to visualize the hydrology of these systems and where water was coming from. Whether it be various aspects of the creeks or the stormwater pipes, and also just what were the observations that we saw, going out there, with this question in mind and seeing what we saw. And so a large part of this actually was mapping the stormwater and sewer infrastructure, and that's because we don't have a combined stormwater and sewer system here. So the stormwater, as we all know, goes directly to the ocean, and the sewer pipes are separate, but in this area, they're very close together. And so there could be some interactions between the two systems. So a large part of what we did was gathering information about how old these pipes were and what condition they're in, and if they, if there was potential for interactions. And so that kind of goes along with the last task, which was basically saying, okay, what is the story? What has been done in the past? What hasn't been done? What are the data gaps? And bringing together all of this previous information from all the different agencies, because this has been going on for decades and it's been in the hands of a lot of different people, and I think has gotten picked up and then dropped off. And so we talked a lot with those agencies and tried to basically integrate what the story was. So along those lines, we went back and took a look at the harbor study that we did. And the microbial source tracking that was done was actually analyzed in a way that is not how it's recommended to be analyzed now. There's a lot of detail with that, and you can ask me more if you want afterwards, but basically we reanalyzed the data and we looked for detection of specific species rather than trying to extrapolate concentrations. So I have new results that I'm going to share with you guys tonight. And so before I get into that, just want to share this slide about the kind of situation that we're dealing with here, which is basically that we have watersheds, and the pollution that travels across the landscape travels across property boundaries. And so, and you have a lot of different land uses and different types of water. And so it's very difficult to try to trace back something like water across rural areas, which we have a lot of up in the upland areas versus the industrial and urban areas down in the harbor. And then we also have coastal watersheds. So we have freshwater environments, and then we have saltwater environments. And that means a lot for the survival and life cycle of bacteria. And so I think that's all I'm going to say about that for now. So this is a map of the three. You can't really see it because there's actually another little drainage down there, but it's basically a map showing the three watersheds that we looked at closely because these are the closest to Capistrano Beach. The orange is Denniston Watershed. The green one below, that's really small, is the Capistrano Drainage. And then the blue one is St. Augustine. And that used to be called Bathhouse in the past study. So I'm going to start with Denniston, and I'm going to start with a map of the watershed because, like I said, mapping the infrastructure was a large part of what we were doing. And so this watershed is really interesting because it's not just a creek. You can see that the stormwater system hooks up to the creek at multiple locations. And we're still in the process of trying to ground truth where those actual pipes are and how things are flowing. But I think this was really interesting for us because I know for myself, never having the opportunity to look into it this much, I always thought of Denniston as Denniston Creek going straight to the harbor. But it's actually not. And so just to give you a little taste of the type of stuff that we're doing, like if you look at those two bottom dots on the map, those are two sampling points. So if we were to see higher counts at the lower one than the higher one, it wouldn't just be something that could have entered the creek between those 2 points. It would be something underground. And on top, that could have come through the stormwater system. And on top of that, if you have a sewer line crossing over it, then that's another potential thing that could be happening. So that sort of scenario, tracing that all the way up these watersheds and trying to see where the inputs are. So here's a picture of Denniston Outfall when it flows into the harbor. You can see there's a lot of water coming out of there. And this is during the wet season, so it's not quite as high in the dry season. And for this watershed, I'm just going to show a few pictures because we actually didn't see any trends in the data. And so it wasn't clear, there wasn't certain areas that were higher or lower, and a lot of that probably had to do with all of the stormwater system inputs. But there were some interesting things that we saw, and that was, we definitely confirmed the aspect of wildlife being really prominent in this watershed, which is what has been thought for a long time. But what we also found is that a lot of it is actually very urban wildlife, and it's happening right down by the outfall on Prospect Way. So I definitely think there's wildlife upstream, but I think it's also an issue downstream with feeding of the cats and the dumpsters that are right on the creek and all the raccoons that are in there. And then we've also seen really strange things like this blue water that was taken July of last year. This very strange blue water that persisted for a few months that we ended up kind of ruling it down to maybe an RV dumping. So kind of periodic things like this that we are gonna follow up on and try to address, but not anything super consistent. And this watershed actually has less bacteria than the other watersheds, so we didn't focus on this one as much. So moving on to the Capistrano Drainage, you can see here that there is no creek. That the Capistrano outfall that you see in front of the brewery only exists from stormwater drainage. And so we asked the county for a map, and they gave us something, but that wasn't really quite how it was looking out there. And so we really spent the past year going out here over and over and over again, trying to trace the pipes back and trying to understand how this system works in order to figure out where water is coming from, because we all know that that pipe will flow even in the summer, which is really strange. So here's the outfall. This is actually the winter flow. You can see a little bit of water coming out of there. That's after a rain event. So in the summer, it's just a trickle. So because we don't have a creek, we spent a lot of time looking at how the system works and where we saw water and where we didn't. And what we found is that we really didn't see water throughout much of the system at all in the dry season. It really happened right before the outfall in the county stormwater system, which is right along Capistrano Road. It's a couple hundred feet. It's really small. The rest of that system that we saw is all private. And so we, sort of observed this, and we started lifting up manhole covers and things like that. And what we found is that there's water coming from actually the north and the south side of the road in the dry season, just from a few feet above the outfall. And so we've narrowed it down basically now to this little area, and at this point you can't see much else or take samples because you're dealing with storm grates here, and so we haven't been able to take any samples upstream. So that's kind of where we're at, but from looking in there we can see that there's some random pipes that sometimes will float in the stormwater system, and legacy pipes that probably haven't flowed for a long time. And when we took a look at our past microbial source tracking data, which was from the outfall, out of everything that was tested, only human and dog were detected. And so again, this is a presence-absence detection. And dog can also represent raccoon. So in the future, this is the small area that we are going to be focusing on. And that is right from between Barbara's and the brewery. And you can see there's a lot happening here. On this map, we overlaid the sewer system. So you can see that the lines are very close together, and they even cross in some areas. And there's also, sewer laterals that are hooking up that we don't necessarily know exactly where they are. And there's also washdown areas and grease traps and things like that. And so, this has been something that the agencies have looked at in the past, but it's very unclear what ever happened from some of those investigations. If some of the stuff was hooked up in the right place or if it wasn't, it's not really clear. So even talking with them, they aren't sure where some of the stuff is or where it goes. And there's also some confusion about who should be receiving things like wash water. So those are...
I was wondering if you had given this presentation to Granada Community Services District.
Yeah, so we've talked with them as well as the county and Sam. And that's kind of where we're at. And people are going to bring up, there's always a lot of different potential sources. If you think about what's above the pavement, yes, there could be dumping into the storm drains. Yes, there could be pet waste that gets washed into the storm drains. But we're talking about right now what is happening consistently underground, and that is that there's water in the dry season. So it's either clean water and it's getting dirty, so it's either groundwater and then it's getting contaminated, or it's dirty water to begin with that's in the system, which it shouldn't be. So, you know, as we all know, this area is a little bit complicated and there's not a lot of records. We have some buildings that have been around for a long time, and some that have been paved over, and so it's, you know, kind of unclear where all the old and new pipes are. It's kind of this situation where you have water lines and sewer lines and stormwater lines that are crossing over each other or maybe hooked up in the wrong places. So moving on to the St. Augustine Watershed, you can see how each of these are so different. The St. Augustine is actually a creek, so you can see the creek coming in from the upland areas, and then it's tunneled underground into the stormwater system, and then all of the orange is the stormwater draining from all the residential areas. And then it goes all the way down through the Harbor District parking lot. And you can see our various sampling locations that we used to determine where we saw increases in bacteria. So there's the entry point into the harbor from St. Augustine. So what we found was that we did see higher bacteria counts downstream on St. Augustine. And we also saw really high counts upstream when it was raining. So that kind of shows that in the creek itself upstream, there wasn't much happening, but once it rained and washed the streets from the residential areas, that was when you saw really high counts upstream. But in the dry season downstream, you didn't see very much bacteria until the outfall. And so we slowly narrowed down our sampling spots and started talking to the guys down in the Harbor District, and they were amazing and worked with us and started lifting up manhole covers and digging around and pouring water down drains and trying to figure out where everything was and what was happening. And so we basically were able to determine our focus area from that. So, and same thing in the Harbor District, private stormwater and private sewers, same sort of thing with these strange pipes that are old that actually would sometimes be flowing. And past MST, past microbial source tracking data, again, was only human and dog, nothing else. So we want to thank the Harbor District because they were amazing, and we would not have been able to find out what we know now without them allowing us to dig around down there. And there's, again, other reasons for this. St. Augustine has really bad biofilms and sediment right there in the outfall. And so that's something where bacteria can be exacerbated. When water comes out, it can get resuspended. So there's always more to keep in mind. So now this is our focus area. You can see that it's just basically the Harbor District parking lot to the outfall. And so what we're seeing was increases in bacteria between Tenant Row, or I don't know what you guys call that, but, and like the beginning of the parking spaces where you can see a bunch of crosses in the sewer and storm lines. And the sewer lines are actually the ones that are going to your guys' private pump station and then up to the GCSD lines. And so that's going to be kind of the area we're going to be focusing on in the future. Okay.
Thanks, Brittany. We have a set of recommendations moving forward based on our findings from the data analysis, mapping, field reconnaissance, and literature reviews. Basically, Brittany has passionately devoted a good chunk of her life over the last couple of years to being a detective and trying to figure out how all these pieces come together. She's very personally committed to it, as are some of our stalwart volunteers like Keith Mangold and some others. So these are some of the recommendations coming out of that work. And one of the things I want to point out to you as you're looking at this is you might notice some very big leverage of your investment in this table that's presented here. in the Harbor District, the fact that you invested in this early on and enabled us to do some of this work and partner with others has really helped to bring in some other resources from the county. There's an acronym up there, NRCS, that's the Natural Resources Conservation Service of the USDA. Surfrider was already invested in this area. We've been able to partner much more with Surfrider in a focused way. And CCAG, the City and County Association of Governments. So we hope to continue that trend with involvements with some of the others that we've reached out to, like GCSD, Granada Community Services District, and Sewer Authority Mid-Coast. So on this table of recommendations, the first three really focus on the plumbing. Brittany spent a lot of time talking about the plumbing tonight. The county and the Harbor District stormwater systems are over 35 years old. And the sewer system is over 50 years old in some sections. And they cross over each other in some places or are very close to each other in others. And there may be groundwater that helps to connect them or what have you. So there has been some previous work by some of these partners to scope or repair these lines that was really valuable, but limited in scope, and about 20 years ago at this point. There are a number of unknown connections and discharges into the county and harbor district systems, and we'd like to investigate that further. So you'll see that some of these recommendations focus on that. We asked GCSD if they would do the dye test, and they said that they would. And the methodologies for reading that dye, the best practices have evolved since they last did it. So we've asked them to consider doing it in a different way, and they said they would. And we talked with the county about whether or not they could investigate some of their lines and how to sequence that, whether that makes sense to do all at the same time or wait and see what we learn from some of the other investigations first. So we've already started that conversation. With the county, we also spoke with Sewer Authority Mid-Coast about their force main line in the area and what they can and can't do in order to investigate that. The fourth recommendation up there on education and outreach and assistance focuses on the broader watershed and all of those complex inputs as opposed to the plumbing, which is closer. But, those are the things where we don't see necessarily significant trends in the data. They can be episodic, they might be more significant during storm events, and are more diffuse in nature. For example, there are a lot of people like I used to be who love dogs and love clean water who didn't realize that dog waste in their backyard actually might affect coastal resources. So there's a lot of that work that can be done.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So for a few years, I've brought up the idea that there'd be a postcard campaign that would be, for the whole area in the Granada Community Services District, that obviously the stormwater runoff is going directly into the harbor, in large part, to educate people about cleaning up their pet waste. And I know that obviously there hasn't been the resources to make that happen yet, but I noticed on this section that it doesn't look like Granada Community Services District is listed under education and outreach. And it seems like there should be a joint partnership amongst the agencies to fund this postcard campaign, and also they have the mailing list that would facilitate it, whereas the Harbor District, we could facilitate the mailing list for the tenants of Pillar Point Harbor, but obviously we don't have the mailing list like GCSD does for the on-land residences. So I was just hoping that there could be some forward momentum. Unfortunately, we heard tonight that there's a hold on committees, and right now we don't have a water quality committee, which is really unfortunate for the district. But if there's some way we could move this forward, I'd be happy to do something if I knew, what to do. I could go speak, I guess, at a GCSD.
Well, can I address it?
Yeah.
So we have talked with them about that, and the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast being a joint powers agreement includes them. So whereas historically some of the there are some things that we're asking GCSD to do separately, and there's some things that we're asking them to do through SAM. And so we have talked with GCSD and Sam about that, about a postcard campaign, about a number of other efforts and how to fund that. Including, actually, I haven't told you yet, that I just asked for funding today for a program that we're calling Bark in the Park, to be able to meet with dog walkers in open spaces and talk about best management practices about pet waste. And a group that Sam has been convening to talk about education and outreach and how all these different entities are gonna fund and assist with that. We've talked with them specifically with GCSD about a postcard campaign and about some other things as well, like something that we've asked the county to fund, which is basically a web portal and to get information to folks, and these email alerts that we send out that I'm hoping that many of you who receive them are also forwarding to your constituencies to alert people when it's time to clean up pet waste. Were you gonna add something else to that?
So we actually are getting funding to do this work, starting in the next fiscal year, through the county actually, because they have regulations in San Vicente Creek and San Pedro Creek, and I asked them if we could extend that campaign to Pillar Point Harbor, and they said yes, that was fine. So we're gonna be starting basically full throttle in July, and it includes basically everything that Kellogg said, which is the brochures, the email alerts, cleanup events, and so, yeah. And so,
Will it include postcards?
so it's gonna be flyers, it's gonna be mailers, so mailers to the residences. It's gonna be a few classroom lessons, it's gonna be 2 cleanup events per year. And so I actually have in that scope of work, like, we're gonna be reaching out to you guys and to GCSD for your guys' any mailer distribution list you're willing to share. And we've been talking about this in the COSIDE 1 water group, which has included GCSD. And so everybody's aware of it, and everybody's basically, it's definitely becoming like a big community effort.
That's
And
great.
and we've also been thinking more broadly than the harbor, and thinking about the coastline generally. And so the city of Half Moon Bay has stepped up and increased funding so that we could expand water quality monitoring for first flush down there, working with the city of Pacifica, and part of what Brittany and I have been working on is how to best leverage these different investments, because everybody has different jurisdictions and mandates and needs, and how to stitch those together so that it's gonna have the most impact.
Great.
So, so then the next 2 are really about continuing the essential data collection to make sure that we're focusing on the source of the problem, not just on the symptoms, or to make sure that we're not kind of spending a lot of money on feel-good projects that make us feel like we've accomplished something but really won't address the problem. So to make sure that we continue with the monitoring, and then also to help us focus in on areas, but then also as we do implement improvements, water quality monitoring will tell us if those were effective, if those were the right actions. I also want to highlight here how Surfrider, CCAG, the NRCS, the county have really stepped up with their own resources, as have some of the others that we were just talking about or about to. And then the last one on this list is, I think, what many of you have been waiting for. Although we have some early recommendations on this list, this next phase that we're entering into is going to develop some more specific remediation measures and best management practices that are grounded in the empirical data. Some of the areas where we wanted to focus on recommendations for inspection based on our understanding of the system from the work that Brittany and her team have done. Is we largely focus inspections here, and I want to underscore using the most effective, appropriate technologies and methods. There are some places where it's appropriate to use a camera, that might be better. There's some situations where it's better to use dye. Certain types of lines need certain instruments or methods, etc. But keep in mind, we're not able to we don't have the resources to do all of it at once. So where we're really focusing is on the most persistent bacteria sources that have the most impact, as opposed to spreading out all resources and touching on everything. So if you were to address, or we were, or the entire community, all the people involved in this, were to address where we see the biggest problems and do some really great projects, there may still be bacteria in the harbor. There still may be bacteria that exceed recommended limits in the harbor because they're inputs from a very complex and dynamic watershed that includes wildlife, periodic dumping, etc., pets, etc. And also issues with harbor dynamics. So there's circulation and retention of the water, tides. There's sediment that can hold or grow bacteria, biofilms that Brittany referred to before, like algae that may grow. They need an input. They don't create bacteria out of nowhere. There needs to be bacteria coming to them, but they can retain the bacteria. There may be legacy bacteria that are persisting even if we stop new inputs. And as Brittany mentioned before, there's really different way that the bacteria persist or behave in saltwater versus freshwater. And the harbor and these outfalls are where those two meet. So I think that it's good to move forward with some of these recommendations, but I want to manage expectations about whether you're going to get everything cleaned up. And I think that's it. Thank you. I don't know if you have any questions, Brittany and I could answer them.
Sure, please.
Comments and questions? You guys have done a fantastic job. I know, Brittany, you've worked really hard on this, and it's great to have you here, and I hope you stay with it, because it's not glamorous digging into sewer pipes and trudging up stinky creeks, and I really appreciate the work you guys have been doing. And I for one think that while 100% success is going to be difficult to achieve, I think you'll make a good dent in it where you're going. So I really appreciate all the work. Now I have a couple questions. Question number one is, when you were talking about remediation, what do you see the RCD role in that?
That depends on what's recommended. So if there was something that, if there was a project, a discrete project to be implemented, if it's some sort of like capital improvement project, it might make sense for the entity that owns that infrastructure to take the lead. If it's something that goes across jurisdictions, that's something where the RCD can really help go across jurisdictions. Often, when there is a project to be implemented, entities will actually enter into an agreement with us to do that project for them, or be secret lead or what have you. I think it depends on what the recommendations are.
That's great. So one other question I have is, can you guys say a little bit more about source tracking? Just a little bit about how different it is from when the first source tracking studies were done, and the current technology.
Yeah. So the first time that it was done, the source tracking study, that started in 2008. And so there were a few things about the way that was done and what could be different now. One is that UC Davis did that study. And so they used probes, markers for species that they made. Now EPA has approved markers and recommended markers for things like human and dogs.
Can I jump in and
Yeah.
explain some of the jargon?
Yeah.
So Brittany is the person that actually knows this stuff, and I'm the one that just talks about it. So the microbial source tracking, what that means is it's genetically testing the bacteria to see what animal it came from. And so microbial source tracking, or MST, is that genetic testing, as opposed to some of the other water quality monitoring, which is counting the number of bacteria that are present by growing them in a lab. And those are fecal indicator bacteria. So that means they came from the digestive tract of a warm-blooded animal, and they're an indication that feces were present. The bacteria themselves aren't the problem. They're an indication of pathogens or other things that may be present. When UC Davis partnered with us and we contracted with them to do this study, this was a very new technology using microbial source tracking, and it's an emerging technology, And Brittany's been tracking that and new ways of evaluating those data, assessing those data. So I just want to backtrack and say that first.
Thanks. Yeah, so there's now specific approved markers. And another thing is that the way that was known at that time or thought the best way to analyze the data was to look at the concentration of these markers compared to the general number of bacteria. And so not only did our study do that, but our study also built a model to try to get closer to that. And so they extrapolated the data and basically said, okay, this number, if it said a concentration of 5 for human, if you run it through the model now it's 0. And so there was a model, and then there was certain assumptions based on that. Now, in microbial source tracking, it's just common knowledge that the best way is don't even look at the concentration anymore. Just say, is it there, is it not, because there's so much that isn't known. There's a lot of false positives, a lot of false negatives. It's not, the technology is not perfect by any means, and they're still developing a lot of different methods, like different lab methods that we're actually waiting for them to come online and have labs that can do this. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
great, thanks.
We do have a question from a member of the public, Catherine Slater-Carter.
Thank you. Excellent, and I'm really glad this is being updated. I appreciate it. I am the chair of SAM, and I really appreciate being able to work with you folks on this. We are right now working on getting our budget approved for fixing some of the pipe, but there is some hesitancy on the part of Half Moon Bay to help fund the interpipe pipeline. So please stay tuned. It's an important issue. But the airport, 30 Cafe, is in Montero Water and Sanitary District. And years ago, Montero sent the airport a note saying that they needed to connect to our sewer system. Rumor has it that the septic system is failing at the airport. And rumor has it that it has been failing for a long time. I know that the water quality records from our wells at the airport show very high levels and increasing levels of nitrates. But I would think that looking for a flow source pollution for a failing septic system with some wells along maybe the south side, ostensibly south side of the airport might be very useful. When they did that at Stinson Beach in 2010, they discovered that there was a septic system there that was polluting the beach. And that water the water flow, the hydrologic flow, is down the airport from Lost Beach to the harbor. So I would suggest as part of this, if you can, to do that. Also, Renata and Montero are both customers of Seacoast Disposal. And I know Chris Porter is very, very involved in helping with local community efforts. And so we might be able to find a way to get a flyer or something. I'd be more than happy to introduce you to Chris and have you work with her if you don't know her. If you do, just sit down with you and we could see what RCD and Montero and Renata can do to at least take care of this and everything. But I think one of the more serious issues is the failing septic system at the airport. As I've been aware through the rumor mill of this for 15 years. And it's been, I think, I'd have to check our records, but it was a long time ago that we sent the county the letter saying they needed to connect to our system, and they have not wanted to do that. It will be expensive. There's going to have to be lines run under the airport and so on. But I would think with the billions of dollars the county has, they could spend a little bit on public. Thanks.
I have a couple comments if when.
I have one more question, if I may. Do you have access to all the sites you want to sample? Is that,
It's an interesting question. It's always good to have more sites. The more that, when you start seeing trends,
Yeah.
start adding in sites in between the two where you're seeing a difference. So yes, I feel like we pretty much have been able to access everywhere we can in those 3 watersheds. But when it comes to the storm drains in Capistrano, that's a little bit different. We do have the tools to get in there. We know how to get in there. We have buckets and ropes and all those things. But the flow has been so low there that we haven't been able to get anything. So that's kind of a stay tuned, and that's something we plan on working with Surfrider on.
I just had a couple comments. Well, first I wanted to thank the Resource Conservation District for all their years of effort, and also I was noticing tonight that we've really had sort of the same team on this for a long time, and I think that's super helpful because there's institutional knowledge now, which you guys have, you know, illustrated, and you know, Brittany is obviously very invested in this project, and I know Keith is a tremendous volunteer, and Surfrider has been really supportive, and Kellex is, you know, kind of making it all happen, which is fantastic, and the board is supportive, so just really appreciate the effort, and the consistency too is really helpful for the community. Ed kind of asked one of the questions I was going to ask about, like, how do you get at sewer pipes and things under businesses, and I guess that's kind of hard to do, to test some of those things. I know we were having some leaking problem under the sewer pipe, or in the sewer pipe under the concessionaires building at the harbor, but I think we fixed that. I don't know what the status of it is currently. That was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so you guys did fix the sewer line underneath Tenant Row, and so that is probably in good condition. It's the line from there to the pump station and back up that is hasn't actually been looked at and is pretty old. So at that point, we would recommend, in that case, I would recommend a camera.
Okay.
But in the case of up on Capistrano Road with the sewer lines up there, where we largely know where the sewer lines are, and no, they've also repaired a section, but that was also a small section, dropping dye. So it pretty much come down to camera or dye, and I think it just depends. I think for you guys, I would recommend camera.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to pick up on is Catherine's comments. It seems like I don't know if the septic system has been looked at the airport, but since it's a county airport, it seems like maybe that would be something the county could look at and should look at. And if there's a chance for the airport to get onto the system, I don't understand why they wouldn't do that. So it would be great to have more information, and maybe we need to ask the county, what's going on there with that.
Yeah, I actually wanted to address her comment too and say that, we have considered septic. The airport is a little bit out of this sort of boundary that we put ourselves in for this study.
Yeah.
But I super appreciate that knowledge that you guys have, and I wanted to invite anybody else who has information like that to contact us.
Okay, that's good to know. And then also wanted to, while we're at it, thank Catherine for bringing up the issues with the pipe replacement that's needed to address some of the sewage spill problems that we've been having. We've read about in the Half Moon Bay Review, and it's really great to have a chair of Sam who is supportive of that type of repair work. And I'm hopeful that all three of the agencies involved at SAM will work together to make that a reality. And that's pretty much it for me. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Thank you for your presentation. It's greatly appreciated. Every time you come in, we learn something.
Thank you.
Item 11, rates and fees effective August 1st, 2017, and subsequent adjustments by Consumer Price Index.
Thank you, President Mateusz. As you can see, the staff report here was largely crafted by Glenn Lazoff, with the assistance of Boomer Henshorn, our accounting manager. As you know, Glenn is unable to be here this evening. Boomer is present, but fairly new, and as the staff report talks about, this is the sixth occasion that rates and fees have been on the commission agenda recently, and the district has not increased rates and fees since August of 14. So for that reason, and my somewhat passingly greater familiarity with the topic than Boomer's, I'll be presenting the staff report. You have been distributed also an amended Exhibit A. Exhibit A is our schedule of rates and fees. What this shows in yellow highlight are simply those items that staff is recommending be considered that are different from the marked up version of the rates and fees that are in your package. And I'll focus mostly on that. In the staff report, it talks about the advance pay discount to $120 a year from the 1 month of free birth rent. And staff has taken that recommendation back and recommending that we stick with the free month of birth rental for advance pay. I think to limit it to $120 for somebody who's, for example, got a larger slip, the incentive may not be there. The advantage to the district in having that those funds up front are significant. This is fairly standard practice in many marinas, and so we're recommending that we stick with that as an incentive to our customers to pay in advance. And this will somewhat offset the impacts of some of the other CPI increases that we're recommending. I'm going to step back a minute to the first page of the staff report where it talks about the fiscal implications and budget status. Where the staff report says that this would increase district revenues by $114,000, the advance pay discount, keeping that at 1 month, would reduce that by approximately $12,000. We currently have 11
So where was that in the staff report? Just I want to
staff
mark
report,
it.
page 1, fiscal implications.
It's going to be what now? What's the
Not
total?
114, it's more likely going to be more like 102. And staff is not recommending any changes to the budget to accommodate that at this point. Should any changes to the budget be necessary, we can address that at the mid-year budget review. We currently have 11 customers taking advantage of this program at Oyster Point and 38 at Pillar Point. So that's one thing that we wanted to bring to your attention.
What program?
The birth rental discount by getting a month free in exchange for paying for a year.
And it was how many at which place?
There was 11 taking advantage of the program at Oyster Point and 38 at Pillar Point. The other thing that staff is recommending that is actually not addressed in the Exhibit A, but is addressed in the staff report on page 2, under Oyster Point Marine, we talk about the special promotion there. And further consideration on that, staff is recommending that we not implement that program, especially moving forward. That we hold off on that promotion, and certainly should we feel the need, we can always come back to this commission and recommend a special rate. We're not recommending moving forward on that.
What was the promotion? I'm sorry.
That boats less than 26 feet can rent 30-foot slips for $100 a month between May and September. There is an incorrect number also on page 11-2 on the Pilkington Harbor. You see the Exhibit A amended is correct with $7 a night. The staff report says $10 a night. This is for anchor outs in the outer harbor at Pillow Point. The idea here, more than revenue, because clearly $7 a night is not going to generate significant revenue, but more than that is to basically force anchor outs to interact with and contact the district office. However, because we are a harbor of safe refuge, we are recommending that the first 7 nights of anybody anchoring out in the outer harbor are free. Going on to page 11-3, again, the advance paid and easy pay discount. The other items are unchanged since the last time we have looked at this. On page 11-4 of the staff report, the staff report is incorrect. The amended Exhibit A is correct. This talks about crab pot storage and service fees, crab pot staging and service fees. It states that staging, the staff report states that staging begins October the 15th with a portion of the fee refunded if the area is cleared by January the 1st or 45 days after the close of season. That should in fact read after the start of the season. The idea here is that crab fishermen come in, stage their pots in the parking lot before the start of the season. The season starts on November the 15th. The idea is those pots should be out and working, cleared out of the parking lot within 45 days. The reason for the qualifier is that should the season not start on November the 15th, if the season starts on December the 1st, then we would anticipate that the areas would be cleared of crab pots in that instance by January the 15th, 45 days after the start of the season. This was the subject of much discussion with the Half Moon Bay Seafood Marketing Association. They're very familiar with this program and agreed with these recommendations, recognizing that there are costs associated with the district for the crab pot staging. The other changes that are highlighted in the amended Exhibit A, first page of berthing, any vessel that takes up, this is highlighted, any vessel that takes up more than 50% of the width of the adjoining slip must pay the rate for both slips. We have 2 berths side by side between 2 finger docks. Ideally, the space in between those 2 finger docks is divided equally right down the middle, and the boat is on one half and another boat is on the other half. Boats are getting larger, beams are getting wider. You see the boats are encroaching on the adjacent slip. As long as they're encroaching on the adjacent slip, and we know about that, we can manage that process by putting skinnier boats in there. When it gets to the point where that wide beam boat is actually taking up more than half of the adjacent slip, that adjacent slip has in effect become unavailable to the district. And that boat will then pay the rate for both slips. So we allow for some encroachment, but when it gets to the point where the adjacent slip is unusable, we would take that.
Do you know approximately how many vessels would be impacted by this?
That's a good question. I don't at this point, but we do know, and we'll be considering as we look at a reconfiguration of dock H, that certainly in the commercial fleet, some of these vessels are getting wider. Again, this may be that this affects primarily either a multi-hull or commercial, and there has been conversations with the Half Moon Bay Seafood Marketing Association about this, and they understand the need for this and are making this support. Let's see, highlighted somewhere in there, had gone dropped off the Exhibit A. Page 1 of your amended Exhibit A was the discount for full-time commercial sport fishing vessels at 15%. We had not recommended deleting that. That was not deleted in any markup or change version, track changes version, but it just somehow disappeared. The other highlighted changes are, once again, address the issues that I talked about at the other harbor. So this amended Exhibit A begins with Oyster Point and then moves on to Phillip Point. So those are the changes that we are proposing between the package that was distributed with the track changes version that was fundamentally the same as previous versions that have been presented to you. Those are the changes that we're recommending. Again, it would result in a decrease in the expected additional revenue to the district. We don't see that as significant at this point, and should that turn out not to be the case, we can address that in the June budget review. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Anita is here, Boomer is here. If there's any specific additional detail that you'd like to answer questions.
I have like one question. Maybe this is a question for John. So I was wondering if last time we talked about rates and fees, we discussed the fact that other marinas do a lease agreement, not month to month, with their tenants, so that, well, for a variety of reasons. And I wondered if there have been any follow-up on that by the staff.
Not at present, Sabrina, but I do agree that it is common practice for marinas to not only have a transient and a monthly, as we do, but have a pay schedule for the rates where you have a transient, which is anything less than a month, then a monthly, and also a seasonal, anything under 6 months. And then also a further discount for an annual, for those that do commit to a 1-year period. There are, as I've discussed with Steve, there are some drawbacks to that as well, so we need to look into it a little further. There are advantages, in fact, too, as we're doing it with the monthly, that it does say in our rental agreement that we can, as the lessee can as well, terminate with 30-day notice for no cause, which does alleviate some of the legal remedies and some of the legal requirements should there be tenants that have, for instance, questionable seaworthiness with their vessels, or for whatever reasons are constantly violating our ordinances, and it's just not as clear cut and something that we could easily litigate. We can at present simply identify those persons. Of course, we would always do it in a fair manner, but we could identify those persons, and with just documented cause, just simply not renew their rental agreement with a 30-day notice. So when the current one would expire, we just would, after giving them 30-day notice, just simply not do another monthly agreement with them. Whereas with an annual agreement, for instance, we are, both parties are committed to an entire year. So to terminate that annual agreement prematurely is more difficult. That said, I think it is something that we will be considering. There's definitely a lot of models to duplicate.
Any idea when we might learn more about it, or is it kind of far down on the list of to-do items?
That is more the challenge. It's not, we've got a lot of issues that we're trying to address at present.
Got it.
Playing a little catch-up at
Yeah.
present. But it is something that we will look into. There are some more issues as well that I've briefly discussed with the general manager. As I say, we at present have a lot on our plate.
Yeah, got it.
We might even look at, as I think I discussed before, changing our rental agreement to a birthing license, which is considered best management practices at present, which further enables us to take easier legal action for those that are not following our rules and regulations.
Thank you. The last thing I wanted to say is just that I really appreciate staff's commitment to working collaboratively with our commercial fishing partners. And I know the commission received an email from the Half Moon Bay Marketing Association, Half Moon Bay Seafood Marketing Association earlier today, and the one concern that they brought up was the change that was going to remove the 1 month free if you pay a year in advance, and it looks like that's been addressed, so I'm really happy to see that. And I'm also happy to make the motion to approve rates and fees amendment to reflect increase per consumer price index for 2016 San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, all urban consumer index 1984 100 and as shown in Amendment E, effective August 1, 2017, and by said CIP on July 1 of each subsequent year.
And adopt resolution 17-12. I'm sorry I left that off.
And adopt resolution 17-12.
Second.
I do have a question or a comment for staff. It has puzzled me for a couple of decades how you can have passenger service fees and list one rate when this harbor used to have 3 and now has 2. And I don't believe that demonstrates transparency for the district or the harbor district to show the public that there's one fee when we charge a large number, the majority of the people that go out of the harbor pay 90 cents. And there's a very small number of people that would be raised to $2.32. And whether it's annotated one way or another in here, I believe for transparency, why are we not telling the public that there's 2 different ways to pay passenger service fees?
And as we've discussed in the past, President Matoush, the other rate is embedded in leases.
But why is that not revealed to the public? Why are we hiding that from the public?
I would not agree that we're hiding that from the public. We have a lease with certain entities, and that rate is embedded in their lease. This is a rates and fees schedule, not lease terms, so it's a kind of a different animal. When those leases come up, we can certainly look at that.
Could we add a footnote in the rates and fees that explain that?
Yeah.
Just like an italicized footnote?
Certainly we can do, we'll find that point and we'll do an asterisk to a footnote that explains that other passenger service fees are dictated by existing leases.
So can I add that to my motion that we're going to add that footnote?
If the second,
I'll second.
but the motion was seconded by Commissioner Bernardo. If Commissioner Bernardo accepts that friendly amendment to the motion.
Sure, I will accept that.
Yeah.
And I agree with that, because I think at the end of the day, these fees are passed down to the customer, and they should kind of know, how those are allocated and not feel like these are hidden kind of fees. Even though I know they're not, but it could be perceived in that way.
Should we have that?
Yeah, so
down?
it's-
To require addition of footnote regarding
Explaining the difference.
passenger service fees in leases and the differences therein, or words to that effect. Does that work?
Yeah, I think it should be open to you guys to wordsmith it as best you can.
It's always hard to wordsmith on the
Yeah,
fly.
Yeah, but I think
but
we
you
all
know the
understand.
intent.
Yeah.
We understand the intent,
Very
and I'm
good.
sure Commissioner Matoush will have some thoughts about how to wordsmith it.
Yeah,
Very
I'm
good.
fine with just trying.
So there's a motion and a second to the amendment.
So, roll call.
Yes. Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner Mathush?
Aye.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Aye.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
All right, item 12 is to approve and adopt the 2017-18 fiscal year final budget. And a member of the public did come up to me earlier and say we did have an error on page 12-23, also known as page 11, about our reserve total, and it was just simply the total was put in one of our charts in the wrong place.
Thank you, President Mathush. Again, I'll be making this presentation, and I did bring that to the attention of our county manager, Boomer, and Henthorn. I'm not sure if he's an answer to that. We'll come to that during the course of the presentation. Before I go on, I would like to recognize specifically Glenn and the work that he has done over the last couple of years in getting this budget to this point. Then I would specifically like to call out Boomer and David Doyle, who I think is in the room. Yes, he is. He's there. And Flo Hodges for working on this as we manage this transition. I'd like to welcome back Anita, who's now here for a while, and taking the place of Glenn. So I think this staff report and the budget that you've got in front of you is the epitome of teamwork by a number of people, and I just want to specifically recognize those 4 individuals and Glenn as well. So having said that, the task before you this evening is to adopt the final budget for the 2017-18 fiscal year. We adopted a preliminary budget in April, and in May we brought to you a discussion of some of the changes that we might see in the adoption of the final budget. But first we've got a short presentation that we'll go through, thanks to Flo and her work on this.
I have to say, this is the best looking presentation the Harbor District has ever produced. It's very pretty looking.
Thank you.
And you guys have done a great job. You really deserve recognition for that. Yeah, I know it's a lot of work to do on this. Not just the presentation,
That's those two
but
right there,
everything.
Boomer and Laura.
And David.
Yes,
And David.
And David over there.
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you very much for those kind words. Better this year than last, better next year than next. So, to run you through just a little bit of the budget process here, we're looking at our scope of operations at Oyster Point Marina and at Pillow Point Harbor. We're all very familiar with that. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. What we do is we divide, this is the second year really of doing this, we're dividing our functions into an enterprise side of the house and a public side of the house. And the enterprise side is berth rentals, liverboard fees, boatboard fees, rentals, permit fees, the other fees and charges that people are levied to access the services of the property of the district. And then on the public side, we've got search and rescue and environmental, trail access, beach access, the public fishing piers, park and landscape maintenance, trash removal, parking, outreach and education, public restrooms, just the basic public side of the house. And that's quite the significant part of our functions. So we know that a budget is an estimated, summary of estimated revenues and expenditures. It's a working document, a financial plan for the commission, and it is not an accounting document. It's a planning document, it's a communication document. It's a tool and it's living, and ideally we have estimated through the course of the budget process our revenues conservatively enough and our expenses aggressively enough that it doesn't take that much amendment during the course of the year. However, it's a document that we will look at again in the middle of the year to make any adjustments that are necessary and recommend those to you for your approval. So we operate on the fiscal year, and it represents the staff's best estimate of the expenditures needed to operate. So this is our summary comparison of year over year. And this is done at the appropriations level, and this is the meat of the budget document. The other numbers all feed into and support these numbers. So, which is the laser, oh there we go, laser pointer. So our first column is our actual from the 15-16 trial balance. And so you can see that our total revenues for 15-16, $10,000,007, total operating expenses 6.7, net for debt expense of 2 in that particular year, capital expenditures of just $750,000. At the end of the year, we were at 14.5 in total reserves. We'll talk a little bit more about reserves a little later on. So then we did the 16-17 final budget. That's the fiscal year that we're in currently. So we don't know where we're going to end up, but we're tracking fairly close to budget, I think. Is that a correct statement? Yes. Well, we are not recommending any changes at this late stage anyway to the final budget. So this was the final budget that was adopted in this time last year, showing a little less in revenues, a little more in operating expenses, a little net, no debt expense, because this board authorized the payoff of our DBW loan in April of 2016. In between purchasing trucks and rebuilding the Radden boat, we did have a budget that included $4.5 million in capital expenditures. When we come back to you for closing out the year, we won't have spent that much. But we were projecting for the end of the year to have 12.2 left in reserves. So we adopted a preliminary budget in April of this year. And you can see the numbers here, 11 million in revenues, 7 for about 3.6 in net. Again, an ambitious capital expenditures program, and taking out of the reserves or prior year, what you can consider the reserves is prior year net operating revenue that is accumulated over the years. At the end of 17-18, we're projecting at the adoption of the preliminary budget for 12 million in reserves, a little over 12 million. We're now recommending some changes. You can see those in the right column, the variance column, which reflects in the recommended draft final budget, the highlighted column there, which shows slightly, let's see, the revenue is about the same, expenses are about the same, a little bit less in net operating, a little bit less in what we anticipate we'll be able to do in capital expenditures. And so that will leave a slightly higher number if we get all of the work done that we want to do in our reserves at the end of 17-18.
So Steve, can I ask you a quick question? So based on the last presentation where there were some adjustments, are those?
Those are
They are reflected in here.
the adjustments discussed in the May
Previous
meeting.
item, no, in the previous item, when the fees and
Yes.
rates,
Yes.
that those numbers are reflected in this,
Thank
because we
you.
got the amendment when we got here, and we got the
Thank you,
list.
Commissioner Corrali. Yes, the anticipated increase in rates and fees is included in this budget. What is not included in this budget is that $12,000 reduction
Okay, that was my
in the
main,
rates and fees
for the net,
at the
net
net
amount,
amount.
right.
We believe that at the appropriations level in enterprise revenues up here, we've got enough slack that we don't need to recommend an adjustment to the draft final budget at this
Okay,
point.
but
We'll come back and
in mid-year,
mid-year, and if we need to tweak any of these numbers, we can do that at that time.
perfect, okay. I didn't think the 12,000 was reflected
Correct.
here, but,
Right,
and you had mentioned that the budget's not gonna change over the 12,000, but I just
right.
wanted to clarify that because we had those new
Yes.
numbers.
Thank you for that clarifying question. So, this chart is reflecting our sources of funding and consolidated expenses. And it divides up the expenses, the funding, according to the source. I'm gonna have to, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at this and recognizing it is a little difficult to read.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get up here so I can see a little more clearly. So you can see in here, the green, this is 15-16 actual. Can you see that there? 15-16 actual on the left, 16-17 final budget, 17-18 preliminary, 17-18 draft final. And you can see green, whoops. The green is the enterprise revenue. The blue is the public revenue. And the yellow, I'll call it yellow, is, those are contributions to the capital projects from our reserves or prior year net operating revenues.
Could we get a emailed a PDF so that we can look
Zoom in?
and then,
Absolutely,
that'd be great.
absolutely. I think this
Well,
presentation
these
is
are
on the
in
website.
here, right?
It's in
These
the packet,
numbers,
yeah.
Yes,
Correct.
this presentation is in here, but it still doesn't
Yes.
really match as well, so I know
it's,
where y'all are coming from.
I think
Right.
if there was one up on a page, we'd be
Yeah.
able to
Yes.
read it.
Yeah, no, I know.
so you can see that we basically left in between the preliminary budget and the final budget, we left our enterprise revenue and our public revenue about the same, but we dropped our anticipated level of capital expenditures a bit. In our, or contributions to our expenses from reserves. That's reflected over here too, in our consolidated expenses, including capital. So here's, again, 15-16, 16-17, 17-18 preliminary, 17-18 draft final. And again, you see here that the really only difference is an expected change in the amount of capital expenses, the capital project that we'll be able to accomplish in the coming year. Summary by department. This is, got you, again, revenue is the top, with enterprise and non-enterprise. Total is the first column, OPM the second column, PPH the third, and admin the fourth. So we can take, for example, our total and see here, our total operating expenses here, for our operating net here of 3.5, this is what we had already discussed. If we do our $7.5 million worth of capital projects, we'll have total expenditures of 15 million, and that will decrease our reserves by 4. That's broken up by Oyster Point. Again, total revenues a little over 3. Total operating expenses a smidge over 2. We allocate some of our enterprise administration costs to each of the two departments. And so we've got an operating net here of $770. We propose in this budget spending about $2 on deferred maintenance and capital projects, reducing our reserves from Oyster Point expenditures by about $1.2 million. Pillar Point, again, a significantly larger operation with total revenues of about 6.5, total operating expenses of 3, for an operating net of a little under 3, but significantly more capital expenses, 5.5, for total expenditures of 9, reducing our reserves by about 2.7 for projects at Pillar Point. So here's a pie chart that's just showing our revenues by department. Fairly straightforward. Pillar Point, Oyster Point, allocated to admin. And expenditures by department. Again, Pillar Point, Oyster Point, and admin. This is breaking out a little further. This is breaking out into public and enterprise. The same chart as a couple of charts ago, but with double the number of columns because we've broken out each of the departments by those two categories. Public revenues, primarily property taxes, and enterprise revenues, as we discussed in that first slide, what that encompasses. Then our allocation of salaries and benefits to either side. We've got better data this year. When we did this last year for the first time, it was based on 3 months of record keeping by our staff. We had asked our staff at the two facilities to track their time by public and enterprise. We built a budget based on 3 months worth of data. We've now got over a year's worth of data. Our numbers are just getting better. So this is a more accurate representation. We know if we spend money on an electrical panel on a dock, that's clearly an enterprise function. If we spend money on cleaning the public restrooms, that's clearly a public function. We use the staff ratio to break out the costs of those things that we're not going to track individually. The cost, for example, of a box of pencils is broken out according to the ratio that we've established through our staffing and payroll report. So if we go through this, you can see that the public side of Oyster Point, we're not seeing any revenue, any decrease in reserves, but we're seeing we're allocating 1.5 in public revenue, with about 1.2 in public side expenses, for a net of about 300. On the enterprise side, 1.6 in revenue, 800 in expenses. We're allocating some of our administrative expense to the enterprise side of 360. So we're ending up with a net operating on the enterprise side of Oyster Point of 440. We're suggesting 1.6 in capital expenditures, total expenditures of 2.8, and as I said before, reducing reserves by 1.2. Same thinking going on in Pillar Point. You can see here 3.7 in revenue, 1.8 in expenses, net of 1.7, capital expenditures of 3.2, total expenditures of 5, and the public side of the house decreasing our reserves by about 1.5. Enterprise side of the house, through the same thing, decreasing our reserves by about 1.2. Admin, again, we allocate our expenses through to the departments. So now here's another way of looking at this. In this chart, we've taken enterprise revenue, all of the rates, fees, lease payments, etc. And now here's our enterprise expenditures. Salaries, wages, and benefits, operating expenses, capital expenditures. So that's what shoots us over the total of revenues. And so this delta here is the reduction in the reserves for the enterprise side. Public revenue, this is for all departments combined again, this is consolidated. Again, here's our public revenue, salaries, wages, and benefits, operating costs, and public expenditures, with again, this delta here being the decrease in reserves because of the capital expenditures. Now we're getting into some detail here. These are the reserves. We're showing here our 14-15 actual. At the end of 14-15, 17.6. Now it's important to notice a couple of specific things in here. We had a restricted debt service reserve of 1.7. We don't have that anymore. We have a debt service liability. That was what we needed to build into the budget in order to make that debt payment. This was the first number there, the 1.7. That was fundamentally the DBW equivalent of last month's rent increase. Right?
Is this an updated page? Because it doesn't match what's online.
It matches this last, pretty much the last section, right?
1 second.
I don't know. I didn't really look at that compared to this.
Yeah, actually,
I guess it's
what's in the
different.
board packet is different from this. It's,
Right.
But not.
what's on the screen is showing 2 additional rows that were mistakenly hidden than what's in the
Is
board
that, is
packet.
that,
But that's on this
thank
presentation,
you.
it's,
I'm just
thank you.
curious if it's different.
right, because this,
17.6, 14.6, 12.2.
It's only those
12.2.
top 2 rows that should be for debt service.
right, but this is,
Okay.
See what I mean?
this
Yes,
is different
okay.
from
The number-
this part of the packet.
I will
Right.
It's
confirm it's
different
updated
from
in the.
I
this
can see
presentation
from
part,
this-
right? I just want to make sure.
I believe so, yes.
Right.
Thank you, Commissioner Brennan. There are some variances in these numbers up here. These numbers here are consistent with what's correct. So we moved some of these numbers around a little bit.
So that's gonna get updated.
That will get
Yes.
updated,
Okay.
and the record will reflect the real numbers. Thank you, Commissioner Brennan.
Does the chart reflect legal fees and settlements?
No, this is reserves. This is what we set aside, for either unassigned or restricted debt service, as I said, and loan payments. This is the DBW stuff up here. We had property, we sold it, we put those monies into a committed reserve for the district office space. That continues. We recommended that getting folded into the unassigned. So you can see that as we went from 14-15 to the 17-18 recommended, we've reduced the number of categories, but some of them we've kept absolute. We've created a new reserve for the election, so that the election is a smoothing reserve. The idea there being that because we got hit with a $750,000 bill this year for the 2016 election, that what we should do is set aside $375 in the off years, and so that reserve account will basically just peak and fall to zero, peak and fall to zero over a 2-year cycle. $375 into it 1 year, that $375 gets taken out and added to $375 of operating expense to fund the election in the next year. We're maintaining we've got an assigned reserve for the funded termination benefit liability. This is our obligation to our retirees, customer deposits and prepays. And so you can see here that we've gone, even though we have drawn down our reserves, we are increasing over the 16-17 budget, but we are down below the 15-16 budget and 14-15 actuals. This is reflecting capital expenditures and ambitious and aggressive capital program and the pay down of the DBW debt. This is, again, another way of looking at our reserves graphically over the course of 14-15, 15-16, 16-17 final budget. We don't know the final number yet. 17-18 adopted preliminary, and again, 17-18 recommended draft final. showing that change that I addressed earlier in the presentation. This is a graph that was created, this was, again, I got a shout out to the team. This was created this morning. This chart was created this morning. Yesterday, sorry. It was yesterday. So what this is doing, this chart is doing, is starting in 2017 fiscal year and looking forward 5 years. Here's where our reserves are now. If we do no capital projects, then our reserves climb to $33 million over the course of the next 5 years, because we are assuming in this that net operating revenues remain about $3.5 million a year. Little bumps in here though, because we do recognize that we've got that $750,000 every other year. The net operating expenditures remain constant. That we do receive for the capital projects. Well, we're hoping $13 million over the 5 years. We've included in this a decrease of lease revenues at Oyster Point, and this line here, we keep going the way we're going, but we don't do any capital projects. This line here, we keep going the way we're going, but we do the projects that we've proposed in front of you. This line here is looking at our reserve policy, and the reserve policy says that the minimum reserves, exclusive of restricted, committed, and assigned reserves, should be 20% of our operating budget. So that's this number here. Our restricted, committed, and assigned reserves currently are totaling a little over $6 million. So this shows you that even if we are successful in accomplishing all of our quite ambitious capital projects program, at the end of our 5-year period, because we've got good net operating revenue, we'd still have a significant and healthy reserve going forward. Again, I want to thank our team here for this presentation, particularly Love, who put this together for us. And finishing up with some of the capital improvements projects that are planned at Oyster Point, removing the bait shop. We've got to do some filtration work. This is the boat washdown area here, and we've got some work to do here in filtration. And dock 12, we're proposing the replacement of that dock. And for Pillow Point Harbor, we're proposing, as we've all talked about amongst other things, the demolition of Romeo Pier. By the way, bids are due on that project June 30th at 2 o'clock. John has been working with Moffett and Nichols. We did do a site visit, and it was a mandatory site visit, meaning that if you didn't attend the site visit, your bid is non-responsive. We had 3 seemingly qualified contractors attend that site visit. Project we've talked about quite a bit. We'll be coming back to you with next month, I believe. John, is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Sidewalk improvements and ADA compliance at Pillow Point, and getting into some LED lighting retrofits. And there's all of this, of course, subservient to our mission statement, ensuring the public is provided with clean, safe, well-managed, financially sound, and environmentally pleasant marinas. That's the end of the presentation. We'll go back to my seat. Be happy to answer any questions the board may have. Thank you.
Steve, I just want to thank you. I know everyone else has thanked the staff, but I know that this has been a huge improvement, even during the 1 year, almost 2 years that I've been on the board. So thank you, and I love this reserve graph. So that's really great. But can you also, I'm sure you're in touch with Glenn now and then, can you please just
thank him too, because I know that he's gotten so much input from all of us, and, you know, sometimes we sounded critical, and, you know, but I think he's really helped make this better, and not just in terms of the substance and the readability, but just the presentation of it.
Thank you, I'll do that, and rest assured, after talking with him at 6 o'clock this evening, that he's anxiously awaiting the video getting put up online so that he can relive the pleasure that we're having this evening.
So this is gonna go into
Yes.
this presentation and into the,
Correct.
this part too?
Correct.
Okay, great, I just wanna make sure it goes into both places. Thank you.
I have a question. Previously, we've always had CIP projects broken out between the two locations in addition to a consolidated version.
Mhm.
Is that in here?
Yes.
Okay, what page do I go to see the
It's
two?
1239, that's, they're broken out by the two, Phillip Point and Oyster Point Marina, the two columns.
And
That's page 27 or
27 is the budget.
1239, yeah.
12, that's the
And then also at the last page, page 51, 1263, has it for the 5 years broken out by budget.
I think that was the change from last time when it was from the GL. And it was like a mishmash of information.
That is correct.
So thank you for doing
That
that.
is correct.
And the reserves chart was
Yeah.
because of the last.
Yeah, I know, but I like these pictures too, to kind of remind us what we're focused on.
Oh, I see. But they're not in two groups. They're going this way.
They are on the
They are.
last page.
1263, which is basically
Yeah,
page
1263.
51.
Yeah.
Any other comments on item 12?
No, but I'll move to approve
Second.
the FY 2017-18 final budget, resolution 1709.
And I just have a couple comments before we vote. So I also really appreciate all staff's effort in preparing the budget, and we've made so much improvement over the last year or so. It's really impressive. You know, I've been on the board for 5 years now, going on 5 years, and it's really like night and day compared to what the budget used to look like. So I really appreciate everybody's effort, and especially Glenn, who's not here, and Anita and Steve and all the staff. So just want to put that out there. I also am still concerned, and I think some of you might remember that I didn't support the 5-year capital improvement plan that we came up with, or what did we call it? Is that what we called it? Primarily because of the fact that we have not sorted out all of the extenuating concerns related to the situation at Oyster Point Marina. We've gone through some very significant changes recently there with losing a significant amount of lease income, and there's going to be very significant construction impacts, which may in fact reduce occupancy quite significantly, and it's unclear how long that construction is going to last. We have not been assured that there's any finite deadline by which the construction is going to be finalized, so basically it's no end in sight. Also there's a letter attached in our, well, there will be, I guess it hasn't been passed out yet, from Bud Ratz, which was originally sent to the board on May 17th. And it goes into some detail about the concerns with CIP projects at Oyster Point Marina. I don't want to bore everybody with the details because you already got this letter on May 17th, but it is going to be in the packet in the minutes for, was it May 17th meeting? Yeah. So anyone will be able to read the letter from Bud Ratz on the website attached to the May 17th, 2017 meeting minutes. There are some very significant concerns that have been brought up by the public. It's my understanding that our staff has now requested that our legal counsel review those concerns, but that hasn't occurred yet, so there hasn't been information provided to date, but that's coming, I assume. So for those reasons, I'm not comfortable with approving the budget, and that's specific to the CIP projects at OPM.
Any other comments?
I'm gonna like to call for the question.
Roll call.
Okay, Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Chancarelli? Aye. President Mateusz?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz? No. Commissioner Brennan?
No.
All right, moving right along to item 13. Adoption of a Public Records Act policy. Mr. McGraw.
Thank you, President Mateusz. There was a special meeting of this commission on June 7th regarding, at which we received a presentation from District Council on the Public Records Act. We reviewed a Public Records Act policy. There was some good discussion occurred around that policy, and we, but the staff, let's see, the item was tabled with a request to return. So, as a result of that meeting, staff made 2 additions to the policy included in the board package, to include a reference to social media and to clarify that only the Board of Commissioners has the authority to amend policies. I've also formatted it differently to make it easier to track the content. So in thinking through some of the comments that were made during that meeting on June 7th, it suggested that contractors and/or consultants be specifically referenced in the policy. Staff believes the only time that a contractor record would be disclosable would be if it were addressed to or received from district staff or commission, and thus this would be disclosed through that means. The functionality of the district's email system was questioned, while staff is ready to state that no system is fail-safe and problems can occur. System staff believes is fundamentally sound, and the district's IT consultant is available to assist any commissioner at any time. There was reference made to some of the third-party apps that are out there for communicating, and the proliferation of these apps, WhatsApp, Instagram, Twitter. Staff believes it's reasonable to discourage, and the Public Records Act policy, especially as it relates to commissioners, is full of discourages and recommends against rather than categorical statements of shall not or will not. But due to the proliferation of communication apps, staff believes it's reasonable to discourage the conducting of district business, texting, or other such means, and to recommend when necessary when a district supply phone be used for basic text messaging. Concern was also expressed in the meeting about the district's general manager or district council perusing personal emails. It bears repeating that the Public Records Act only addresses the conduct of the public's business by public employees and officials. The content of the communication is personal, it is not a public record. Advice may be sought for communications that occur in the gray area between clearly subject to possible disclosure and clearly not. This may be particularly true of personnel within matters. The policy attached to this staff report will meet the criteria for receiving the SDLF, Special Districts Leadership Foundation Transparency Certificate, and is consistent with the district's ongoing obligations under the Public Records Act. Staff and the general are already planning for the implementation of a web-based Public Records Act PRA software next request that provides tracking and adds self-service transparency to PRA requests. I believe we'll be able to announce the rollout of that very soon. So with that, we're recommending this Commission approve Public Records Act Policy 5.40.0 and adopt Resolution 17-08. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I thought we had really specifically, what was the date of that last meeting? Or the
June 7th.
So at the June 7th meeting, we had specifically, at least I know I did, mentioned that it would be helpful to have examples of policies from other agencies so that we have some comparison, especially given the new law and how other agencies are addressing the new law.
Thank you, Commissioner Brennan. And if I may actually refer you at this point to page 14-2 and 3, the next item on the agenda where I address this. I could have actually transplanted and cut and pasted this paragraph into this staff report as well. But looking to other agencies and CSDA for best practices. And I think it's fair to say that as I have been looking around at other districts and agencies, I don't think there are any clear resolutions of what the best PRA policy is yet. I think a lot of the issues related to the Public Records Act and specifically the Supreme Court decision of March are yet to be resolved. I think that a lot of certainly smaller agencies are probably just relying on compliance with the Public Records Act and are possibly struggling as well to develop new policy. And I'm not sure that there are many agencies out there that probably need to pay the close attention to this as us in reference to the number and complexity of some of the Public Records Act requests that we get.
So
So I don't think there is a state of the art out there. I think that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
And I think
I'd just like to respond to that because actually that lawsuit or the change in law that occurred recently happened, and I'm sure that Stephen Miller knows way more about this than I do. I believe it was triggered by the city of San Jose. And what agencies, and oh, by the way, the requests that we get for public records pale in comparison to those of larger agencies, where they have their own designated staff and departments. And I'm sure Commissioner Bernardo knows that, you know, the number of requests that larger agencies get, such as the Port of Oakland and large cities like San Francisco, San Jose, and even Coastal Commission and
yes.
so many other state agencies,
yes.
where they have their own departments specifically to deal with PRA. It's like comparing apples to oranges. It's just a whole different ballgame, and it's very professionally handled. And I think by looking at those types of agencies and what they're doing, we would have some benchmark. Did you look at any of those agencies?
I didn't look at any agencies like the City of San Francisco, City of Oakland, Coastal Commission,
San Jose.
San Jose.
Okay.
I tried to focus in on commerce.
Because we had asked for that, and we'd asked for information from CSDA. If they had it, maybe they don't.
They don't.
But I think that by not providing that, I have nothing to do comparison to, and so I'm not comfortable with this policy not having the additional information that we requested.
One of the issues that I faced was a request to do that, as I mentioned in the following staff report, and also the request to bring it back on June 21st.
I don't recall us requesting that it come back to this meeting.
That was in the,
Yeah.
it was specific.
I don't
it was-
recall
it was
that.
specifically mentioned, yes.
Yeah, I don't recall that.
Is there a reason to rush it? And my memory of our ask was for examples, not summary of examples.
Right.
But I get your point that if you had to do it in such a short window, I don't see how we could have done it.
I think it's also important to remember that a policy is adopted without much fuss, generally speaking, by the board. And so this commission, when a state-of-the-art policy is developed by someone else, or if there's new information, certainly we're always interested in having the best policies. I do think that we would be well served by having a policy. The board has said that they want to get the SDLF certificate of transparency. Having a PRA policy is necessary to doing that. And certainly as we develop better information or get those examples, we can certainly bring them back to the board to perfect this policy if it's lacking.
Okay.
I just like to follow up on that. I mean, we've had years to develop this policy and it hasn't happened. And I am not comfortable with supporting what I consider policy that has not been well vetted or well thought out as a temporary fix to then do more work later and come back with a better policy. I would rather get a good policy in place, and I'd be happy to help work on this type of policy, but there hasn't been an opportunity for any sort of collaboration by the board in the policy making. So I feel like we're getting what I consider not a well thought out policy sort of shoved in front of us, but we're not being provided with what we requested, which was information from agencies that are better staffed and better funded. I don't mean better, but let's just say more staffed, you know, as sort of benchmarks or comparisons. And so I'm just very uncomfortable with this sort of like rush job on policy making. And it's not what I was taught to do through CSDA and in the books that I've read about being a good board member and a good advocate. It doesn't resonate with me as a good idea.
If I may, I'd like to just address that. I do think it's a bit of a mischaracterization to say that this is a temporary fix. I think this is a solid and sound policy that was developed to a large extent by your legal team, who have a lot of experience in public sectors, not just with us. Hanson Bridget, I don't know how many public agencies Hanson Bridget represents, but it's...
Well, with all of those agencies, certainly Hanson Bridget has examples of other policies from other agencies, and those are not here, and we should have had the benefit of receiving those as we asked. And so I'm very disappointed that that didn't happen, and in my opinion, this policy is not well crafted. So I disagree, and I don't think that it meets the concerns that were raised at the June 7th meeting. And so I'm not seeing that all of those concerns got filtered into this, and I don't even see how they could have because of such a short turnaround. So it's not, you know, I'm not blaming staff for that. It's just, it didn't happen. And so it's just not something that I can support at this time, although I totally support getting our certification and all of that. I just think that we need to be thoughtful about what we're doing when we're making policies.
Commissioner Crawley.
Thank you. My understanding is that based off of the June 7th meeting, that this is currently the state law, right? Basically, this is based off of the current California state law, and these track changes are the comments that we made. Thank you for including these from our June 7th meeting. So I would like to make a motion to approve Public Records Act Policy 5.4.0 and adopt Resolution 17-08.
Second. And I just have a follow-up question. What law are you speaking about?
The California PRA laws. So
This
there's a motion and a
policy
second.
does not affect the PRA law whatsoever. The PRA law is in place regardless of this
Right,
policy.
and so this is codified. So I'd like to call the question.
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
No.
Commissioner Chancarella?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
No.
President Mateusz?
Aye.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 14, reimbursement of commissioner legal costs related to Public Records Act compliance. General Manager McGraw.
Thank you, President Mateusz. Again, this item was discussed at some length at the June 7th meeting. There are, and this is related to the reimbursement of a commissioner's private attorney in reviewing the responsiveness or the response to a Public Records Act request, especially in light of the Supreme Court case wherein commissioners may have to dig into their personal email accounts for responsive
text.
records.
In phones and texts, right?
Yes. So, again, there was significant discussion at the meeting on June the 7th. Several points were raised. And I've addressed these in this updated staff report. First is the district's duty to defend. District council stated that to a large extent, commissioners have broad protection, and the district has a large responsibility to defend the district and in certain instances, individual commissioners. This is in response to a concern that commissioners were exposed to personal liability. The scope of the review. Concern was expressed by commissioners regarding the large number of documents that may need review. Discussed that requests under the Public Records Act are focused, and that purely personal emails would not be considered responsive, and thus the privacy of individual commissioners is protected. Again, this goes back to that sort of the gray area between the clearly non-responsive and the clearly responsive, and ideally that gray area is comparatively small. While there was discussion about personal versus agency-owned devices, the majority of PRA requests and responses are likely going to center on the use of non-district email accounts that reside on an email provider's service or software, Outlook, Hotmail, Gmail, or the like, and they're not as dependent on a specific device. Thus, that email account can be accessed from any device in any location. Again, this is that paragraph that we just discussed. Additional staff is requested to determine what other agencies may be doing, but also to bring the matter back to the June 21st meeting. As I said before, other agencies like us are still struggling with some of this, and certainly case law has not come down yet that may adequately address the issue. So there are options for this commission to consider. Should the commission wish to allow the reimbursement for personal legal fees associated with PRA requests, you could revise the PRA policy. You could revise the existing commissioner expense reimbursement policy to specifically accommodate PRA requests. Or you could make no change to district policy, which would still allow for any commission, this commission to review each request on an individual basis in advance, as with any other expense reimbursement not covered under the balance of policy 4.2.4, again attached. If the commission does not wish to allow for the reimbursement for personal legal fees associated with PRA requests, any commissioner may of course request the assistance of district council. I think it's important to note that, as I say in the staff report, when a request for records under the PRA is made to the district is responsible for responding to this request. The requests are made to the district, not to individual commissioners. Thus, staff believes that professional services used in support of fulfillment of the request should be under the direction of the district. To allow for an attorney who may not be versed in the Public Records Act to determine for the district which records may be responsive to a request could be problematic if it's not advised. Additionally, what I didn't address in the staff report is the clear conflict that may be presented to such an attorney whose fiduciary responsibility is to the client. The client, in this instance, where personal attorney being used, would be to the individual commissioner and not to the district. And it is the district that is being asked to respond to the Public Records Act request. Additionally, as I said at the beginning of the staff report, if this commission elects item 3, the no change to district policy and allowing for reimbursement of legal fees when approved in advance by the board, the commission may also consider at this time that Commissioner Brennan and perhaps other commissioners would like to make that request. Commissioner Brennan has made that request in response to Public Records Act that require further advice of counsel prior to being addressed. So with that, again, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, comments? Commissioner Bernardo?
Yeah, I just want to say that for me, philosophically, I'm opposed to the Harbor District being responsible for individual commissioner legal costs. That, to me, this is my personal opinion, that is analogous to the gifting of public funds to individual commissioners so that they could pay off their legal funds. So I do not, I am very much opposed to the gifting of public funds to individual commissioners for any type of legal costs, because that's why we have district council. District council's job is to protect us as a board, not as Robert Bernardo or et cetera, et cetera. So philosophically, I'm totally opposed to that, and that's why I'm going to support making no change to district policy at all.
And I have a
That's just my comment.
I just think this is such an interesting situation with the new law, and it's fascinating. It's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out over time with other agencies, and of course larger agencies than this one. But I hear Robert's argument, and I think you could also say that by using the Harbor District's council to review personal emails, that is a gift of public funds, and it's my understanding that it's not legal for the Harbor District's council to provide legal work for individual commissioners. The Harbor District's legal counsel only works for the board, not for individual commissioners. So I think that's sort of the flip side to the situation, and I think that it's really going to come down to what the courts decide on this, and people that are a lot better informed than we are. So, you know, it's quite a predicament. So I tend to lean towards seeing it from the perspective that I just illustrated, but I can also understand why Commissioner Bernardo sees it from his perspective. But either way, whether it's a gift, considered a gift by having a commissioner's council represent them, or it's district council representing a commissioner as an individual reviewing their personal email, either way, a lot of lawyers are going to make a lot of money. And I think that's sort of the bottom line. So, you know, that's
I'd
kind
like
of
to
where we're at.
add something to that, and that is having the district council act as counsel for an individual commissioner. It's like having someone serve two masters. And just like Commissioner Brennan said, the district council works for the district. And so to ask him for advice on something that relates to an individual commissioner makes absolutely no sense, because their responsibility is not to you as an individual, it's a responsibility to the district.
So I think we should place bets on what the court's going to end up doing on this one. I think that'd be kind of interesting to, maybe we could win some money.
Commissioner Brawley?
So I'm not going to comment on the reimbursement issue yet, because I think what's before us is whether or not we should change the district policy for reimbursement for reimbursement in general. So that it was board policy 4.2.4. So that's the first item that I think we should address. And so I would like I'd like to make a motion to make no change to 4.2.4. And then I'll address the other question. I'm just basing this off of the staff report, which is divided, well, there's a summary and the recommendation. The staff recommends that this commission make no change to the adopted policy, and that's the motion I'm making, which is to make no change. In other words, adopt 4.2.4. And then I think we can talk about whether or not Commissioner Brennan should be reimbursed for her personal legal fees for specific PRA requests. So I'm making a motion to make no change in the district policy and to just, I guess,
Second.
adopt 4.2.4.
Okay, just as a point of clarification, if this says date of approval 6/21/2006, should that be 2017?
What are they looking at? Oh, I do.
No, if you look down where it's revised, it's lated, the latest state was September 7th, 2016.
Got it.
So would that be changed to,
You're not adopting any, Commissioner
already
St. Crowley, if I
adopted.
understand your
I'm
motion,
sorry, we're
to do
not making
nothing.
changes, we're
Got
not,
it.
but do we need to make a motion on this, that we're not making changes?
No.
Well, the
There's nothing
effect
to vote
of
on.
passing the motion would be to make no changes.
Right, that's my
The effect
motion.
of taking no action would also be
Okay,
make no changes.
so we don't have to make a motion, I mean, I'll retract, but I thought
Motion's
that,
been made and seconded.
okay,
So the motion is on the floor.
right, motion's on the
Are
floor.
you retracting your motion?
No.
Well,
Roll call.
I have some comments.
Okay.
So, I think that, I kind of don't really care whether we keep it the same or change it right now, because I don't think it really matters what we do. I think this is all gonna play out in court, and we're just gonna find out how it works out. I don't think it really does anything either way, whether or not we change it. And as far as legal fees go, Commissioner Corrali mentioned legal fees for me. I
Yeah,
don't
that's
have,
because it's on here.
well,
That's
that
why.
may be right, but I didn't write the staff report. I don't have any
I
legal
didn't
fees. Could you let me speak? You keep interrupting. I do not have any legal fees regarding Public Records Act requests whatsoever. So I have no legal fees. And I plan to keep it that way, if we're not being reimbursed for legal fees. So, I just wanted to clear that up.
Okay, so, I'm not gonna retract the motion because I'm thinking back to a time in 2016 when this policy was actually violated. So I just wanna make sure that this is reaffirmed, that this policy is in place. So I'd like to call the question.
What are you talking about?
Let's call for the question, roll call.
President Mateusz,
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz,
No.
Commissioner Chancarelli,
Aye?
Commissioner Brennan,
No.
Commissioner Bernardo.
Aye.
All right, moving on to item 15.
There's a second part to the staff recommendation.
So
So,
if there's no change,
No.
there
No
is,
change.
are you requesting future reimbursement of legal fees?
I don't have any legal fees.
It's future,
That
The-
request has been made.
the policy reads that the board shall approve reimbursement in advance.
There are no legal fees. I have no legal fees.
I understand. Okay, moving on then. Thank you.
Where are the emails? Where are the emails?
all right, item 15. Authorize an amendment to the San Mateo County Harbor District Ordinance Code requiring the use of absorbent pads in vessel bilges. Mr. Moran.
Okay, this is a motion to approve Resolution 17-10, an amendment to the existing San Mateo County Harbor District Ordinance Section 3.30.140, requiring oil absorbent pads to be installed in the village of all vessels operating in district-controlled waters. Pillar Point Harbor and Oyster Point Marina, the two district-managed marinas, like all large marinas worldwide, have challenges with boat owners not always taking the necessary precautions to prevent oil spills. Small leaks can occur even with a well-maintained vessel, but can also occur when performing mechanical work. Vessel bilges must be maintained in a clean manner, or there is a risk of the vessel bilge pumps discharging oily bilge water overboard, which the U.S. Coast Guard has determined is the cause of 90% of all oil discharged into marine waters. Along with educational efforts, it is important for marina management to ensure there are adequate marina rules and regulations regarding the discharge of oil into the water. Staff believes it is reasonable to require all persons operating vessels in district waters to have oil absorbent material installed in the vessel bilge. The district staff reached out to tenants, local community groups, California Division of Boat and Waterways, California Coastal Commission, Save Our Shores, and District Legal Counsel to gather input prior to finalizing the recommended amendment. While any change to better the environment is sometimes difficult, staff believes the proposed amendment will lessen the negative impact of vessel use in district-managed waters. District staff recommends amending section 3.30.140 to read, "No person shall dump or discharge any oil, spirits, flammable liquids, or contaminated bilge water into waters of the district. All vessels berthed, moored, or operating in the waters of the district must have a biosock or generic equivalent oil-absorbed pad pillow installed in its bilge in order to prevent oil or fuel from being pumped overboard. Dispersing agents or emulsifying soaps may not be used, as they cause oil to sink and are worse for the environment than if the oil had been left alone. Vessel operators are responsible for inspecting the condition of the bilge prior to the activation of a bilge pump. Proper precautions must be taken when performing mechanical work on any vessel. Used engine oil, oil filters, and oil-absorbent materials must be taken to the oil recycling center. Oil filters, or used oil-absorbent materials cannot be disposed of by dumping them either on the ground, in a dumpster, into a drain, or overboard. Vessel owners are responsible for their contractors and any vessel or any failure of their contractors to comply." Our old, or our current ordinance simply reads one sentence: "No person shall dump or discharge any oil, spirits, flammable liquids, or contaminated bilge water into the waters of the district." Now, obviously, we did reach out to, as I've stated, we did reach out to civic organizations, the Half Moon Bay Fish Marketing Association, and sent out the attached, added the letter that I had composed, that I sent out to all of the tenants, both at Oyster Point and Pillar Point. I did get a few responses. The vast majority were very positive. Others just wanted some clarifications, which I was able to do so. We did listen to the input in drafting this, as well as looking at other examples of cutting-edge marinas. This is a cutting-edge policy. California is the leader in such environmental issues. So, again, district staff recommends board approval of Resolution 17-10, amendment to the existing San Mateo County Harbor District Ordinance 3.30.140, requiring oil absorbent pad to be installed in the bilge of all vessels operating in district-controlled waters.
Any comment?
Commissioner Lorenz.
I think the way you went about this is fantastic, and it's a great example of how to do something like this the right way. And I think this is a good start to solving some of the problems with oil in our harbor. And I really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you.
I have a question. With respect to fueling, in a lot of harbors, when you pick up fuel, you're given absorbent pads if you ask for them. Also, the fuel attendant will work with you. There's socks that can go over the nozzle.
Donuts.
Right, and they give you pads to pick up any spill fuelage or fuel spillage that might occur on the boat itself, and then also many recreational boats. I don't know about the commercial, but they have an overflow.
There's suction cups.
Suction cup. So is there a way we can work towards getting something like that to happen at our fuel facility?
District staff, John Draper, and Michael Williams, the other staff members have been trying to work with the fuel dock lessee. As you're aware, the Harbor District does not manage day-to-day operations at the fuel dock.
Right.
However, we do make, oil absorbent pads available to the fuel dock for their use, and we'll continue to increase our efforts, as I suggest in the staff report. Education is a very important factor. I've actually forwarded recently some fuel dock attendant recommendations, which I've asked district staff to tactfully bring to the attention of the lessees at our fuel docks, both at Oyster Point and Pillar Point. We've also, I gotta attribute this largely to Rebecca McCoy, our planner analyst. She has put together, we hope to come reviewed by the general manager at present, but she's put together an oil spill prevention guidebook that we're also going to be putting out. And that's just 100% initiative on her part.
Wow.
In addition, also, it's been a couple months now, but we did also send out flyers to every tenant as well, and posted oil prevention techniques and reminders of where our oil recycler, used oil recycle stations are at both facilities.
No, I have another question. So, I'm not sure who to address this. I'll ask you, and if council or general manager will need to answer, feel free. My question is this, does it make sense for the district to have an ordinance which relates to how fuel is handled when it's being delivered from a fuel dock to a boat? Any comments? Does it make sense for the district to actually have an ordinance that relates to fueling boats? Just
like requiring the use of I've seen.
Yeah, whatever that might be, just so that whoever is either at Oyster Point or here has to follow guidelines that, like you said, are cutting edge and make sense.
Yeah.
They're not. They don't have to necessarily be a huge burden to the fuel supplier.
Sounds like if we're giving him pads, why isn't he giving each person that fuels a pad? In case. That's what they do in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Fisherman's Wharf.
You guys have something to
I've
say?
never, I've fueled a lot of boats, and it's of course, California's cutting edge. But I've never been to a marina where they give you a pad right away. It's always, unfortunately, if there is some sort of spill, because if the fuel dock attendant is communicating well with the owner and asking, and making sure that they are aware that they are not to top off, because obviously topping off a vessel sometimes causes fuel to spill out, burp out the vent, or obviously if you are trying to top off, it can even come out the fill. Most often it comes out the vent.
Yeah.
And then if you're pulling it out slowly and turning it upside down and handing it to the fuel dock attendant properly, you can have no drips at all. And that is of course ideal. And if the owner knows what his fuel capacity is and how many gallons he's currently got in the vessel and only filling up 90%, that's also a recommended guideline. It is illegal for anybody to dispel oil or fuel into the waters already. So, an ordinance that would require the use of oil absorbs while fueling boats could be a legitimate next step for us. Again, I'm not aware of any fuel dock legal requirement for that at present. This is, I think, a very good first step, but that might be the next step. And just because it's not being done anywhere else in the world doesn't mean we can't have something like that.
Yeah.
Can I make one more comment? I'll be
Okay.
quick. So just as a point of reference, and I'd like to put it on the record, so I have a sailboat. I've sailed it up and down the California coast, and when we sail up from Southern California, we usually stop in Santa Barbara to fuel. And my experience there is, first, the fuel attendant helps you with the dock lines, makes sure helps you control the boat if there's an issue with that. Secondly, he does hand you absorbent pads, but he also tells you that it is illegal to drop oil or fuel in the water, and he says he's required to report it, and he tells you what the fine is. I don't remember what the fine is, but it's not small. And he also tells you, I'll do everything I can to help that not happen. And that's exactly what happens. So that's a different experience.
I think that's an excellent example that we should follow.
Very similar to Fisherman's Wharf. I do have a public comment from Dave Olson on this matter.
Hello, I'm Dave Olson. I'm a member of the Big Coast Community Council. I'm speaking as a private citizen. I totally applaud the intent of this, and I have a problem with the wording. Any vessel applies to sailboats, rowboats, kayaks, canoes, which have no oil or fuel. I think you really need to amend this to say something about any vessel carrying petroleum products or something similar.
Good suggestion. Yeah, I guess, what's the definition of a vessel under this?
Yeah. Well, while I would agree that we did not take into consideration a canoe or a kayak, but even sailing vessels often have, even ones that don't have an outboard, which I gotta say, most sailboats of any size do have at least a little kicker motor, and those also are often two-stroke and have oil on board, two-stroke oil on board, but also have a fuel tank on board. And those are sometimes the biggest violators, just because the fuel tank itself, disconnecting the lines, etc., pulling the outboard off the stern, off the transom, and putting it down below. Inevitably, you could have some spillage down into your sailboat bilge.
John, could you say something like, with the exception of human-powered vessels? Couldn't we just add that in to make it clear?
If we think if the board believes that's necessary, I think it's pretty much assumed. And I would say again that I've just largely went from previous examples, that are already successfully used. I didn't try to reinvent the wheel. But again, I must admit, I did not take into consideration canoes or kayaks.
Well, I think about guys that are rowing to and from their moored vessels that are carrying fuel, either for a generator, for a stove, or something else. So now here's a non-motorized vessel that's carrying petroleum products. So you'll see that every week.
That is
Patricia, if I could just make a quick comment, which is that one way to view this interesting conversation is one of enforcement. Presumably, were the district to cite a kayaker for violating this ordinance, there might be a different outcome. I mean, this is my legal perspective at least. The conversation of what does a vessel mean raises legal questions from an enforcement perspective. And did the person have due process? Is it ambiguous? So I have no legal problems with the language as drafted now. Unless it proves to be difficult to enforce because it turns out in practice to be unclear.
have a couple other comments. Are you still?
I'm through.
Okay, is anybody else want to go first? So first of all, I just am really happy that we are making amendments to our ordinance code because it's pretty lame and definitely in need of some updating. So I think it's great, and I think that California's leadership on environmental issues should shine through into our ordinance code, especially given the water quality issues that the Harbor District deals with on a daily basis. So it totally makes sense, and I'm really happy that that the staff has brought this forward. And I have heard about the best practices in Santa Barbara that Commissioner Lorenas mentioned, and it seems like that might be a place that we could look to for best practices that we might want to implement or additional ordinance code amendments. And regarding the fuel dock, I know I've said before that I really think the Harbor District should be managing the fuel dock, and that it should not be a concession, a lease concession, because I think when you have a lease concession as a fuel dock, it just inherently can have problems, and we have had problems with water quality related to the fuel dock in the past, and I think that we need to be looking really closely at best practices at our fuel dock, and just because it's a leased fuel dock doesn't mean that it's hands-off for the district. And I feel like there has been kind of a hands-off approach, and I don't think that that is good for water quality. I also strongly support having a water quality committee or a committee focused on that as part of our list of committees for the district. And I think that it's great to have this item at this meeting, because we just received the Resource Conservation District presentation and heard about the work that they're doing. So, I would love to see our district looking into what it would take to manage the fuel dock, because I think that things need to be done there in the spirit of protecting water quality and the environment, and it seems that we've had issues there before. So
Very interesting discussion, but I think we're getting off topic when we talk about the fuel dock. So could we get back to the topic at hand here and find a motion to approve Resolution 1710 as recommended by staff?
So moved.
Second.
Additional discussion?
Good.
my only comment is just, I was finished with my comments, so you didn't need to cut me off, but it's okay.
Roll call.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenas?
Aye.
President Mateusz?
Aye.
Commissioner Jankarelli?
Aye.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Item 16, Peninsula Clean Energy, PCE, moved to Eco 100, 100% clean and renewable energy. Mr. McGraw.
Thank you, President Mateusz. Before I start on the staff report for discussion item 16 on Peninsula Clean Energy, I'd like to point out it's a little after 9:10. We've got a couple of items after this that should be quick with the CSDA, SDRMA elections. Commissioner Lorenas has a request for a normal update on West Trail. And we've got a couple of pooled consent items, the only one requiring action this evening being bills and claims. How would you like to proceed, President Mateusz?
I have to leave at 9:30.
Personally, I'd like to, after this, reorder bills and claims, and we'll still have 4 out of 5 commissioners.
Understood. Understood. So this item is about going to 100% clean energy through the Peninsula Clean Energy Program. Again, I have to thank, publicly recognize Kinyip Chan, who is not here this evening, for being our most ardent promoter of clean energy programs and energy efficiency. He is the one who initially got us signed up for the Peninsula Clean Energy 50% program, and he, with the able assistance of Lo Hodges here, are the ones who put together this staff report. So basically, this is a recommendation to the board that you authorize the district enrollment in Peninsula Clean Energy, the Eco 100 program. And as it says in the staff report, we did move to 50% a while back. I felt that was within my administrative authority because there was virtually no change in ongoing expenditures for the district. There is a nominal uptick in base rates for the Peninsula Clean Energy 100 program. Consequently, I do feel that that's a board responsibility to make that decision. We did take a look at the last few years, from July 15 and May 17, of utility costs by month. You'll notice in there, for example, there was a decrease in solid waste at one point. That was through renegotiation with ecology. You'll notice a steady decline in the amount of money we spend on communications. That again is directly attributable to Kinyet. And we can look and say that in fiscal year 16-17, from July just through May, in order to be able to do comps, our total district-wide utility costs were 523 in comparison with 536 the prior fiscal year, same period. Consequently, we feel confident in saying that if we were to bundle all utilities together, we, even with an increase to Eco 100, are operating at net savings over previous fiscal years. I would like to emphasize, I think, that as we plan for sea level rise and mitigation of the effects of climate change, it's also important to be proactive at the other end of the equation. And while certainly we have to plan for anything between 12 and 50 inches of sea level rise, us switching to 100% clean energy may not make a measurable difference in that. Maybe I should change that to say, will not make a measurable difference in that. However, you can see from the chart that by switching from 50% to 100%, we will be putting approximately 250,000 pounds less of emissions into the atmosphere. That's not nothing. And certainly, as a coastal district, I think it's important that we take the lead in this sort of thing. Consequently, staff recommends that the district adopt resolution 1711 with one minor amendment. When I wrote this, I wrote the Paris Climate Agreement, and of course it is actually called the Paris Climate Accord of 2016. So with that one minor change, staff recommends that we move to Peninsula 100 and adopt resolution 1711. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I have a comment. So I just wanted to commend Ken Yip for his efforts, and if you could please pass that on.
I'd be happy to do so.
And I know today, when I happened to be here, he was running around working on some plant or something, and he just seems like he's really putting in 110%, maybe more, and it's awesome. So really appreciate that. And this seems like a really good thing to do. I know in the past we've talked about, the district looking into solar, into auditing our use of electricity and water and ways to reduce our use. And I think we haven't quite gotten to that yet. But it seems like that would be sort of the next step after this, is to try to figure out where we're leaking or wasting or those sorts of things, and get that all kind of under control. But really appreciate the staff work on this.
I'll certainly pass on that to you.
Motion to approve.
I move that we adopt resolution number 1711, direct staff to sign up for Peninsula Clean Energy Eco 100 and authorize the general manager to execute corresponding paperwork as necessary with the one amendment
Paris Climate Agreement to Paris Climate Accord.
to change Paris Climate Agreement to Paris Climate Accord.
I'll second.
Roll call.
Edgar.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Aye.
President Mateusz?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
In order to try and get to more pressing business, I think we have a commissioner leaving early. Do you have any idea how long item 19 might take?
I don't.
19,
That's the,
Update
West
on
Trail,
the West Trail.
oral report. That would be, how much have you got to say, John? I know that's a dangerous question.
I can read off the current summary in 2 minutes.
okay.
All right, Greg, please. Item 19, update on the West Trail.
Let's start the clock here.
Put the timer on. Deborah.
The West Trail Shoreline Protection Project suffered a setback due to the mudslide which occurred during the severe January and February rainstorms. The district's consultant, GHD, was asked to conduct an emergency evaluation to ascertain the stability of the bluff. GHD's soil engineers believe that further mudslides could occur if rain continued. Therefore, in an abundance of caution, a portion of the West Trail was immediately closed for public safety, as it could have been unsafe to conduct a clearing operation at that time. California Coastal Commission was notified and began an evaluation to determine if an additional emergency coastal development permit would be required and if it would be needed to be combined with the current West Trail Shoreline Protection CDP application, which was already under review. As anticipated by soil engineers, the bluff stabilized after the severe rain events ceased and no further mudslides occurred. On June 1st, district staff and GHD met with California Coastal Commission, and it was determined the California Coastal Commission would allow the two projects to be handled separately. The primary reason for the separation of efforts is the risk to the eastern portion of the West Trail from tidal action if the shoreline protection does not proceed until federal and state funding is obtained for the slope stabilization. Therefore, GHD is now moving forward again with the required CDP for the West Trail shoreline protection. The next steps for the West Trail Shoreline Protection CDP include the preparation of a study of beach sand supply impacts, provide maintenance and monitoring details, provide general dewatering description, and provide a geotechnical report for the California Coastal Commission review to ascertain the appropriateness of the shoreline protection soil nail wall structure. The report will include the geological setting for the proposed project, note any faults in proximity to the site, and estimate how long the trail would function if no action was taken. GHD, on behalf of the Harbor District, will prepare and submit a permit application for the proposed geotechnical study data collection to be performed at West Trail. The revised assessment will make the document current to 2017. Evaluate the proposed soil nail and shot creek wall for potential biological impacts and provide mitigation measures as necessary to avoid or reduce impacts. This will meet all of the requirements of the California Coastal Commission so we can move forward with the CDP. Immediately upon the federal declaration of state of emergency for San Mateo County, the district staff submitted an application for emergency storm damage repair funding through California Office of Emergency Services. District staff met with FEMA and Cal OES representatives for a site visit on June 6th. Funding opportunities appear favorable and are currently under consideration for long-term bluff stabilization, the Mavericks parking lot repair, and Pillar Point Harbor launch ramp dredging. The California Coastal Commission will consider issuing an after-the-fact permit for the West Trail closure and minor debris cleanup. District staff have already calculated and submitted staff hours to FEMA for reimbursement for debris removal. A new CDP application with California Coastal Commission would be required for any proposed long-term slope failure repair once FEMA funding approval is received.
Great, thank you.
Thank-
Great.
I have a question. We're on item 19, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So, is this a new deal where we're now gonna get staff reports with commissioner agenda items? Because every time I've had an agenda item, I've never gotten a staff report.
I think John just prepared some comments just the way, because he thought about the request. There was certainly no time to get it into the board package. He took it upon himself to prepare some comments.
I think it's great that John gave that fabulous presentation, and I hope that it could be summarized and put online so that people can see the staff report, because there was a staff report for item 19, and it was a great staff report, and I really appreciate it, and I think we need more staff reports like that for commissioner agenda items. If the staff has something to contribute to the agenda item, then by all means, why not, you know? So I thought that was really productive and useful, and just want to make sure that we all recognize that we got a staff report for a commissioner item for the first time in probably a really long time. I don't know how long, it's been a long time. And then the other thing is, I really appreciate that President Mateusz moved the commissioner agenda item early in the meeting so that we could get to it, because we have not been getting to commissioner agenda items, and I think that was very thoughtful of President Mateusz, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
And again, I thank you. Did a great job. It's good to know.
Really good update, thanks.
All right, excellent. Could we go on, I think we're gonna have to extend the meeting,
Could we take a bathroom break, because I've really got to go.
Can we?
well, let's go on extending the meeting first.
I move that we extend the meeting by a half hour. That would be till 9:55. Right?
Okay.
A second.
I hope that we are done before that.
Yep.
But, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You should do a roll call,
Okay.
it's not unanimous.
Yeah.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Aye, but I have to leave at 9:30, so.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner Mateusz?
Aye. All right, 5-minute break. Moving on with item 1 on our agenda, bills and claims.
Okay. I recommend that we accept the bills and claims in the amount of $650,175.48, including $347,020.61, pre-approved in May 17, 2017, and $303,154.87, approved June 21, 2017. And the pre-approved the $350,000 in bills and claims until the next date.
I'll second.
Do we have some discussion?
Yeah, I pulled bills and claims, otherwise we wouldn't be talking about it now because it was on consent. And the reason I did that was I just wanted to point out that, well, first I wanted to say that I did review the bills and claims also, and really appreciated the staff's help with that. And I wanted to point out that we have $22,568 in legal fees from our general counsel this month. I think last month it was 40,000 or something like that. So I just want to make sure the board is aware of that, and also point out that in our board packet this evening, which is also online with meeting minutes for June 5th, there are letters attached, one of which is to the board where Commissioner Lorenz and I are requesting a financial report on the legal costs related to cartel management case number blah, blah, blah. So I think we all know which case number we're talking about. And I think we need to take a good look at how much the 5-year special use permit for the Maverick Surf Contest is costing the district. Thanks.
All right, roll call.
President Matoush,
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz,
Aye.
Commissioner Chancarelli,
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan,
Aye.
Commissioner Bernardo.
Aye.
So going back to our regular agenda, I don't know how to summarize this because I know none of the people. So item 17, perhaps nominations for SDRMA. Perhaps the general manager can shed some light for us.
I have no particular light to shed. President Matoush, you can vote for any number between 0 and 4 out of the 7 listed candidates for the Board for the Special Districts Risk Management Authority. Some of them submitted statements in advance, and Debbie is now distributing a statement from late arrival, Cindy Baudet from the Temecula Public Cemetery District. What I generally look for in these sort of instances, is there any nexus between any of the candidates and our kind of work? I don't see that here. Is there any nexus between geographical region and our role here? And I don't see that here. So I have nothing to add.
Does anybody choose?
I have a question. Do we have to vote? I mean,
You do not
are we
have-
required to vote?
You're not required to vote.
Because I don't know any of these people. So I
Correct,
just,
correct. So
and I
you can-
don't feel comfortable
you can
supporting
take-
people I don't even know.
You can take no action, you can vote for 1, 2, 3, or 4. So, rather than saying, I don't want to vote for any, I make a motion to not vote for anybody, you can just take no action.
Could we make a suggestion to SDRMA that there should be a requirement that all candidates provide some basic information going forward to boards that are being asked to vote?
I believe they did that, didn't they?
Like candidate statements and things?
They have, it's in your board packet.
Yeah, there's like,
Well,
It's in the back.
a lot of this is a candidate statement of qualifications. This is Timothy Hunter's statement of qualifications.
Oh, okay, well then I haven't read this, I didn't see that part. And either we need to take some time and read this, if other people haven't read it, I don't know, or I don't feel comfortable voting for people that I haven't read anything about, so that's my fault for not seeing this.
I think that Commissioner Lorenz and I met David Aranda in San Luis Obispo, so that's the only person I'm familiar with.
David Aranda has a long history of involvement with CSDA and SDRMA. He's a trainer for CSDA as well.
Do you want to give him a vote?
I would, yes, he was great.
All right, that's, see, the only one vote for David Aranda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Brennan,
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz,
Aye.
President Matoush,
Aye.
Commissioner Chancarelli, Commissioner Bernardo.
aye.
Item 18, nominations for CSDA 2017 board elections. General Manager McGraw, we're looking for scholarly advice here.
So, same comments, in this particular instance, 2 candidates out of the 2, you may vote for no more than 2 out of the 3, or you may take no action.
I would support voting for Rob Solano from the Menlo Park Fire Protection District, and I don't know the other 2.
I'll second that. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Commissioner Bernardo,
Aye.
Commissioner Matoush,
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz,
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan.
Aye.
So we've still got 2 consent items that were pulled. Item 3, regular meeting minutes of May 17th.
We've got something to distribute. Thank you.
Yeah, it's okay.
Thank you.
This was, the handout that's been distributed is a letter from Bud Rex about the proposed CIP. This was distributed at the May 17th meeting and inadvertently omitted from the package.
And I just wanted to comment that my understanding is that our staff is working with council to review the concerns outlined in this letter to the board from Bud Ratz, sent to the board on May 17th, 2017. And these concerns have come up quite a bit from members of the public at the finance committee meetings. So that's my only comment.
Motion to approve consent item 3.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner, President Mateusz?
Aye. Item 7, May activity reports, information only, but the item was pulled, so let's have some discussion.
The activity report was submitted. I'm happy to answer any questions, as I'm sure is John and Anita.
I would like to hear about the reports. We used to get oral reports, so I pulled it off so we could get oral reports.
I know that I worked on general administrative personnel and insurance issues. I prepared for and attended board meetings. I continued working on OPM, KNRV lot compliance. I met with the sewer authority of Ms. Coast. This was a group that Brittany mentioned earlier, Coastside Run Water Group. I provided input to an architect for a potential remodel of this building. I met with a realtor to review district options for district ownership of space, and I attended the CSDA chapter meeting in Redwood City. One of the major topics there was, that I took to that meeting was election costs.
Can you say if you got any feedback at the meeting?
I thought I had mentioned this at another meeting, but I did. The CSDA local rep was there, and at the next meeting, which will be in August, somebody from CSDA Legal is going to attend. Other CSDs, other special districts are looking at their election costs, and we're trying to map a path forward, because it was generally recognized that for this district to basically contribute fundamentally the same amount of money as the county towards the election makes no sense. So it's on the radar.
Is this something that the Board of Supervisors could put on the agenda?
I'd like for us to do a little more research before I approach the board.
Okay, thank you.
I'll go next. My activity, operations activity. Pillar Point Harbor is still hovering consistently around 97%. The search and rescue and calls totaled 18 there, and unfortunately that included one deceased person early on. It occurred near Maverick. The district staff participated in the Boater Safety Week, as you can see in the staff report. Kenya, Katie, and Rebecca McCoy, our planner analyst, all wore their life jackets in participation. In addition, I wanted to again acknowledge Rebecca's help in putting together for us the yet to be implemented oil prevention guideline booklet that we will be distributing and putting on our website. And I was remiss earlier because Stephen Miller actually played a role in that as well. His legal team reviewed that and or reviewed actually our ordinance change, and in doing so brought to my attention that other facilities have a oil prevention guideline booklet. So we actually Rebecca jumped on that and moved forward, and that helped us in our efforts. And then also I wrote a letter of commendation to the Pillar Point Harbor staff. Staff member Carrie Smith, he organized and participated in the Half Moon Bay High School Certification in Leadership Training. He made presentations to 2 class periods. He's done that in association with CAL FIRE for several years. I also wrote a letter of commendation recognizing the action of Deputy Harbor Masters Carrie Smith and Tyler Finch for their work to rapidly respond in an emergency vessel in distress, which led to the persons that were assisted writing, the family that were assisted. The wife actually wrote the letter, and her husband and 2 children really greatly appreciated our staff's help. So I thought that was worth recognition. And it obviously reflects very highly on the district, and it was an effort that was so appreciated that they actually took the time to write a letter. Oyster Point Marina still hovers right around 80%, 78% during this record period. They had seven vessel search and rescue vessel operations.
Wow.
I also wrote this month, or in May, I actually wrote a letter of commendation recognizing Deputy Harbor Masters Greg Gubser and Tyler Finch, because they also used their initiative to organize and participate in water safety presentation at Fairlawn View High School. This is something that Greg Gubser has done for a few years as well, and is now having Tyler Finch participate and learn how to help out in that respect. I emphasize highly these, and want to encourage staff members to participate in this, in the public education, which does save lives.
Yeah.
Just the fact that you'll become more aware about rip currents, etc., and boater safety. And administratively, myself and Rebecca had numerous meetings regarding capital improvement projects and SDRMA reviews for Cal OSHA safety standards. That's all.
Thank you for that, and I wanted to say that for years, one of my favorite items on the Harbor District or the Harbor Commission's agenda has been the Harbor Masters activity report. Now we don't have a harbor master, we have a director of operations, but it's essentially the same report as the Harbor Master's report, and I feel like it really helps connect the board with what actually is happening at our facilities. And I think sometimes we get very involved with what happens in meetings and we forget about what actually is happening at the 2 facilities. So I think for me, it's really important to get these reports, and I really appreciate it. And if you could please pass on my appreciation to Carrie Smith and Tyler Finch and Greg Gubser. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
And also Tyler Finch, again, he gets around apparently. So, I appreciate their work and their rescue efforts. And I did have a question about, I have had several people contact me about the unfortunate incident where apparently someone, I think, fell off Pillar Point Bluff and was rescued. Well, they didn't survive it, but their body was found by, was it Dave at the kayak company, or could you explain what happened?
I know our staff participated in the search when it came out, and then the body was later found.
By the guy who owns the kayak company, is that correct?
I'm not certain. I asked where the body was found, and it was found outside of our outer harbor.
Yeah.
So it may have been, it wouldn't have been related to kayaks, being around there, I would think. But it may have been him walking his dog or something else.
No, I think he was out kayaking and he
Okay.
found, but what I heard was he found the body in the water and while he was in the kayak. But I just wondered if you knew more about it, because people.
Just that it was out of our property,
Okay.
our concern.
And, yeah, I just wanted to mention that, the bluff top, which is not our property, but we do have problems with erosion of Pillar Point Bluff affecting the trail beneath. But the erosion, just to give people an idea of how bad the erosion has been this season, it's created quite a dangerous situation along the trails on the upper part of the bluff. And, it may be that this person, slipped and fell off the bluff because of the lack of stability and the fact that the trail now is like, basically going over the edge in some locations. So that's something that I think the Mid-Coast Community Council has heard about, and probably county parks also. So I just wanted to mention that, this trail safety thing is really something that I think all these agencies need to look at closely, because it's really gotten quite dangerous. But thank you for the report.
I can present the report. I didn't prepare this, Glenn Lace off the May activity report, but I can go ahead and give you the summary of what he reported on here. In May, the Finance Committee meeting was held, and also the regular commission meeting, and we provided support for that. There were legal mandated issues. The state mandated reporting, and the compensation report was completed. There were 4 new Public Records Act requests, and there were 3 prior Public Record Act requests that were completed in May. Other tasks that were committed, there was a review of finance documents, HR-related functions. There were 7 employee evaluations that were completed. A meet and confirm meeting was held with the harbor masters on the assistant harbor master job title. And we welcomed 2 new staff, myself and our administrative analyst, Lo Hodges. They were both on board in May. And as far as administration, we prepared, Glenn mostly prepared the transition for the new Director of Administrative Services, and also an application for boating safety and enforcement grant was completed for $83,000. And the other tasks there was some progress that was made. Finance-related tasks, there was efforts to reduce frequent vendors to 1 payment per month. There is a review, and it's ongoing, and Boomer is actually taking the lead on this. There's a review of guidelines for collections, acting on delinquent accounts, berth rental agreement violations, and unlawful detainer actions. There's another follow-up meeting with a meet and confirm meeting regarding the illness, injury, and prevention program. And there was some progress made on the next request, enhanced PRA tracking and transparency system, as well as the website redesign with Streamline. Those are the highlights. Some of the items that there was no progress made at this point, and we're going to continue to work on it, is the analysis of benefits of district election to participate in uniform construction cost accounting, review of tenant financial reports, and tenant insurance follow-up.
So we extended the meeting to 9:55. It's 9:55 right now. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Second. Roll call.
Commissioner Brennan?
No, I had a couple questions, but if we adjourn, something will, but no.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
President Mateusz?
Aye.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. On